Chapter 967. After 24 hours of soaking in a herbal bath to detoxify Fong Ling, Dr. Wendell's operation and the more professional method of treating snake venom in Cambodia, the emergency treatment lasted more than 48 hours. In the end, Fong Ling was still unconscious when she was pushed out of the operating room and sent back to the ICU. Just when everyone thought that she couldn't be saved, Chin Siding came out of the operating room, took off the sterilizing mask and pulled off the airtight sterilizing coat on his body, saying, "Let's wait. This time the disinfection is very thorough. The wound on the shoulder and back is relatively large. Before the wound heals, it's better to stay in the ICU. Such a sterile environment is more helpful for Fong Ling's recovery. Although the wound is large, it won't leave any obvious scars and it's mainly on the surface, so it's not a big problem. She can heal in 2 days." So, Li Nanheng looked at him. Chin Siding threw the sterilizing coat in his hand to the place where clothes were put. Finally, he felt cool and said with a sigh of relief, "Don't worry, she's fine." But because the snake venom has been in her body for too long, the effect of the serum can't reach the best state, so this time she lost a lot of blood to cure the snake venom. She is now unconscious because she is very weak and has lost too much blood. She needs at least a few days to wake up. Xiao Su ran over and asked excitedly, "She's fine now?" Chin Siding glanced at him with a smile. "Are my words so untrustworthy?" Xiao Su hurriedly shook his head. No, of course Dr. Chin's words are trustworthy. The point is that Fong Ling has 1 foot in the door of hell. If my brother wants someone, even if she has 2 feet in the door of hell, I will still fight with the king of hell for her, not to mention she just has 1 foot in the door of hell," Chin Siding said, unbuttoning the collar of his sweaty shirt. "All right, I'm going to take a shower. I'll pay close attention to Fong Ling's situation in Cambodia in the next few days. I'll go back to High City after making sure she's really fine. You rest first. I'll look for you later," Li Nanheng said lightly as Chin Siding brushed past him. Chin Siding snorted and said in a voice that only Li Nanheng could hear, "You'd better accompany your little Fong Ling first. The little girl is young but she has experienced a lot. This kind of snake venom didn't take her life. She's lucky. It's rare for her to have a lover. You'd better cherish her. You always make your own decisions and are too lazy to explain anything. Don't make her disappear." Li Nanheng raised his brows and glanced back at him. "You have the nerve to lecture me?" Chin Siding knew that he was going to bring up Shi Nian's past again, so he turned around and left. As he walked, he unbuttoned the buttons on his shirt's collar one by one. His back view was elegant and at ease. Li Nanheng retracted his gaze. Because Fong Ling's condition had improved, coupled with Chin Siding's solemn promise, he was certain that she would not have any more problems. His mood was much more relaxed, and the dark clouds on his face finally cleared up. "Boss, Fong Ling is fine then she..." Xiao Su was about to speak. But Li Nanheng suddenly turned around and walked toward the intensive care unit. Seeing the speed of Boss Li's footsteps, Xiao Su, she hadn't woken up yet. Did he have to walk so fast? It seemed that he was afraid that someone else would beat him to it. However, Xiao Su didn't dare to ask about Fong Ling's sex for the time being. After thinking about it, he went back to find Han Jin and the two of them shared this shocking big secret alone. Los Angeles, the Fong family. Chin Xiu looked at her mother, who had been sitting on the sofa and stroking the round jade in her hand for more than an hour. "Mom, at first I also refused to do this, but today I can't stop it anymore. Firstly, Li Nanheng is indeed a good child. Secondly, the Li family and the Fong family will have such a day sooner or later. The fact that Li Nanheng would rather marry second brother Cenotaph than marry Mingzhu is indeed very annoying, but what happened recently has forced the Li and Fong families to work closely together. This engagement is still valid. Second brother's 18th birthday has passed. It's time to fulfill the agreement." At this time, Grandmother Fong and Grandfather Fong had already come downstairs. Seeing the two people on the sofa, they walked over. Grandmother Fong sat next to Chin Xiu's mother. The two old ladies leaned against each other and looked at each other. Then Grandmother Fong smiled. "In-law, I know you can't bear to part with her. Not to mention that this child only has a short year of fate with us when she was in swaddling clothes. Even if she is 80 years old in the future, we still can't bear to marry her. But since we can't bear to part with her, and someone is willing to marry her cenotaph, why don't we fulfill the Li family's wish? After all, the grandson of the Li family is a good person. You've seen him. It's not bad to give second brother a place to rest his soul. At least when Li Nanheng is 100 years old, he will meet her in the underworld. At least she won't always be alone." Chin Xiu's mother clenched the round jade in her hand and said sadly, "Didn't you say it's just a plan? Are we really going to let him marry second brother's cenotaph?" Grandfather Feng walked over with his cane. Although he was old, his eyes were full of spirit. He looked at the two old ladies on the sofa and said, "This time, the matter in the military area is very serious and caused a big butterfly effect. The Feng family is also connected to 11 base. Our Feng family and the Li family are safe because they care about the power of our two families. Once we are separated, they will have a chance to take advantage of us. Anyway, we have an engagement. We might as well get it done now. After all, 3 years ago, the Li family also promised that when second brother turns 18, he would talk to us about this matter. I've asked the elders of the Li family. Even if Li Nanhing has any objections, it's useless. Since he has agreed to marry the cenotaph, he must marry me." Speaking up to here, Grandfather Feng glanced at the round jade in Qinqiu's mother's hand and sighed. "In-law, I know how happy you were after second brother was born. When Mingzhu was born, you held her all the time. After second brother was born, you were even more attentive. Back then, when that happened, we were not directly hospitalized. The reason why we were able to live until now is probably because second brother is watching us from the sky. Right now, we just want to give her a good home and the timing is right. Let's let her marry." Qinqiu's mother's eyes turned red. She lowered her head and touched the round jade in her hand. "I just think that such a young child is gone. Her soul must still be that of a child. Will she be wronged if she marries someone else like this? Mom, don't think too much. The Li family is indeed a good home," Qinqiu said softly. Chapter 968. Feng Mingzhu walked out upstairs. When she passed the corner of the stairs on the second floor, she heard the conversation downstairs, and her eyes instantly turned cold. Good marriage. Since it was a good marriage, why did they want a dead person to occupy the position? She gripped the railing at the top of the stairs tightly and looked at the few people who were discussing this matter. Her eyes were cold as she turned back to her room and closed the door with a pang. "Miss?" The servant passing by on the second floor heard the noise, turned back, and looked timidly at the little devil who often lost her temper, not knowing what was wrong with her. The people downstairs also heard the commotion coming from above. They looked at each other and knew exactly what Feng Mingzhu was angry about. But Li Nanhing refused to marry her. No matter how powerful the Feng family was, they couldn't force a woman Li Nanhing didn't want to marry to him. Now the only peaceful way was to accept Li Nanhing's proposal. But the marriage couldn't be delayed anymore, especially after the military took the opportunity to find fault with them. The Feng family and the Li family must unite by marriage, so that there wouldn't be any mistakes. At the beginning, Li Nanhing said that when the second daughter of the Feng family passed the age of 18, he would directly marry her. Now he had to keep his promise. Cambodian hospital. On the third day after the snake venom in Feng Ling's body was completely eradicated, her physical indicators and blood finally gradually returned to normal, but she didn't wake up. When she was in a coma, her body was cold and hot. When it was cold, it was lower than an ordinary person's body temperature, and when it was hot, it was over 40 degrees. When Qin Sighting and Dr. Wendell came to examine her, they said that this was a normal symptom of snake venom. Now the venom had been removed, but some of it would remain in some subtle places. It wouldn't hurt her body in life, but the body would automatically detoxify through the sweat glands on the surface of the skin. Therefore, a high fever was normal. She just needed to pay attention to physical cooling. Seeing that Feng Ling had just passed another high fever, the nurses in the hospital hurriedly took away the ice bag and came in to give Feng Ling an injection. When Li Nanhing stood in the ward, he held the list of military commanders sent by Xiao Su in one hand and took the thermometer handed to him by a nurse in the other. Seeing that Feng Ling's body temperature stayed at 37.4 degrees, he was relieved. He put down the thermometer and turned to look at the unconscious person on the bed. After all the nurses in the ward left, the room became quiet again. The man threw the things in his hands on the windowsill in the ward, turned around and walked over. He tested Feng Ling's body temperature with his hand and then leaned down to her nose to feel that her breathing was smoother and more even than a few days ago. He then casually tugged the white blanket up and lowered his eyes to watch her sleeping appearance. In just a few days he had lost a lot of weight. He was already very thin, but now he had lost even more weight. Li Nanheng was about to reach out to tidy up her slightly messy hair when he heard the door of the ward being pushed open, and he withdrew his hand. "Boss, the new commander of the military this time has been confirmed. He is the second person on the list. Those idiots in the military must have never thought that this person actually had a deep relationship with our 11 base. He is our comrade in arms and our senior brother. These bastards probably won't have any good days in the future." Xiao Su's voice came directly. However, because he was concerned about Feng Ling who was still unconscious, Even though it was good news and he was very excited, he still slightly lowered his voice. However, as soon as he came in, he saw that Boss Lee was by the bed and seemed to be taking care of Feng Ling again. "Boss, you've been here for several days. The base has been waiting for the military to give us an explanation. The base hall has also kept in contact with the military. You'd better take some time to go back. After all, this matter is not only a matter of their reputation but also the life of our most capable sniper team member. Feng Ling has done what she should do, so she doesn't owe the military anything now. Now that they've caused trouble, we can take this opportunity to let them know our base." Xiao Su lowered his voice and walked over softly, looking at Feng Ling, who was still unconscious on the bed. "You've been here for several days. The base has been waiting for the military to give us an explanation. I just talked to the base hall on the phone. After Feng Ling wakes up, let's go back together," Li Nanheng said lightly. Xiao Su pondered. "But is it appropriate to stay in Cambodia like this?" "It's not inappropriate. The base will be fine without me in these days. The Li family is here, and the drill masters and people in charge of various training camps are here. Feng is also here. If the military needs anything, you can call him. Even if I am not present, he will convey the message to me." Li Nanheng said, ignored Xiao Su behind him, looked at Feng Ling's dry lips, turned back to pour a glass of water, and took a cotton swab to smear on her lips. At this moment, Li Nanheng paused slightly and looked at the water glass and cotton swab in his hand. The scene, why was it so familiar? But at that time, it was him who had dry lips because of the coma, and it was Feng Ling who took care of him meticulously by the bed. What happened after she took care of him? What happened? On the top of the snow mountain at Rogers Pass, and after coming back, Feng Ling's attitude changed. "Boss," Xiao Su said in a low voice, "when did Dr. Qin say she would wake up? If you take her back to Los Angeles now, are you afraid that her body can't bear it? She can't suffer too much for the time being. Even if she wakes up, she needs to rest for a period of time and can't go back to the base for training." Li Nanheng put down the water glass in his hand, still looking at Feng Ling's face thoughtfully. "If she doesn't go back to the base, where can she go?" Xiao Su didn't dare to say that he already knew that Feng Ling was a girl. "It's not that she hasn't been to my place. It's not a problem for her to live there for a while." "Xiao Su, wasn't it like sending a sheep into a tiger's mouth?" Feng Ling was so weak now. No matter how powerful she was still submissive in front of Boss Lee. If Boss wanted to do anything to her now, she probably wouldn't even have the most basic strength to resist, right? Well, although he knew that Boss was not so shameless. But he had known Feng Ling's secret for a long time, but he didn't say anything. What did Boss mean? Was he afraid that other men in the base would hook up with Feng Ling? With Boss around, who dared to hook up with her? Chapter 969. The moment Feng Ling opened her eyes, she saw Li Nanheng's face. She thought that she was dead and Li Nanheng was also dead. She thought that the two of them were either in hell or heaven. Before she fully opened her eyes, she frowned at the same time. She wanted to speak but had no strength and could only open her eyes to look at him with difficulty. "You've lost too much blood. It's normal for you to be weak. If you can't speak, then don't speak." Li Nanheng looked into her eyes and gently stroked her soft hair. "Rest well. The snake venom has been removed. You will be fine. Be good, okay?" Xiao Su watched from the side and listened. "Mom too. A large-scale dog food scene?" It turned out that Boss Lee was such a master who didn't care about other people's feelings when it came to spoiling women. Did Boss think about the brothers who had been single in the base for tens of thousands of years? The only one who appeared was a woman disguised as a man, and she was taken in by Boss himself. What a beast. Feng Ling looked at him in a daze and couldn't speak. She could only stare at him as if she understood his words, but also as if she didn't. Perhaps her body really couldn't bear it for the time being. She only opened her eyes for a few minutes before closing them again. Li Nanheng looked at her. After confirming that she had fallen asleep again, he moved his hand away from her head. Right now, Feng Ling needed to rest. She needed enough sleep. She also needed time to recover from the loss of blood and the abnormal nerves caused by the snake essence. After sleeping for another 2 days, Feng Ling really woke up this time. When he woke up, he was no longer muddle-headed. Instead, he was very clear-headed. Li Nanheng flew back to Los Angeles in the past 2 days and returned to 11 Base. When he returned to Cambodia, he pushed open the door and entered the ward, only to see Han Jin and Xiao Su sitting by the bed talking to Feng Ling. Both of them had cheerful smiles on their faces. Feng Ling's smile was slightly polite, and she obviously didn't have much energy to deal with these two people. But it was not difficult to know that the two of them had definitely told her everything that had happened after Feng Ling fell into a coma. Seeing that Boss Li was back, Han Jin and Xiao Su exchanged a look and said, "Well, Feng Ling, take a rest first. We'll talk when we come back." Feng Ling nodded. When the two of them left, she turned her gaze to the man who had already walked to the bedside. Li Nanheng looked down at her. "How long have you been awake?" Feng Ling looked at him and answered calmly, "About 2 or 3 hours. Drill Master Han and Brother Su have been talking to me." She paused for a moment and then said, "I didn't expect Dr. Qin's medical skills to be so good. I thought I was going to die. Did I wake up once before? At that time I thought you were accompanying me to the gates of hell. I even wanted to say that I dragged you down, but I didn't expect that I could survive." Li Nanheng looked at her mockingly. "So do you want to thank Dr. Qin or me for your survival?" Feng Ling glanced at him again. "Thank you. There's no need to mention my loyalty to Boss. I'll do whatever you want me to do. As for Dr. Qin, if there's a chance in the future, I'll try my best to thank him in every way I can." Seeing that she had returned to her original self after waking up, he glanced at her with a sneer, took off his coat, threw it on the back of the chair by the bed, pulled the chair over, sat down by the bed and glanced at her. "You're very calm." This time Feng Ling understood his double meaning. She immediately withdrew her gaze from his eyes and lowered her head to glance at his shoulder. "Boss, I heard that the gunshot wound on your shoulder was also very serious. Thank you so much for that time. Don't say thank you to me again." Li Nanheng looked at her indifferently. "You know very well that's not what I want." Feng Ling did not speak and could only withdraw her gaze. She lowered her head to look at her folded hands that were placed on the quilt and gently clasped together. "Say what you said to me under the cliff again." The man saw that she was obviously hiding something, and his cold eyebrows slightly raised. Feng Ling clenched her hands and didn't speak. "Are you mute?" She looked up. "Boss, do you know the consequences of disguising as a man in the base?" The man's voice was cold as if he were settling scores after autumn. Feng Ling had a premonition that she might be driven out of the base at any time. Her eyes suddenly became a bit awkward, but after thinking for a long time, she didn't know how to explain. It seemed that no matter how she explained, it would be that she had violated the rules of the base. The law was merciless, not to mention such a large base. Not only did they have laws, but they also had their own standards, which couldn't be changed at will because of one person. In the end, she didn't explain but only lowered her eyes and said 2 words, "I'm sorry. I've reminded you more than once to be honest, but you've been hiding it from me until now. If it wasn't for the critical moment of life and death, do you really intend to keep hiding it from me?" Li Nanheng didn't care about her submissive appearance. He was already very familiar with her character and knew that she would only be so obedient when she did something wrong. Otherwise, if it was in normal times, she would be cold and quiet. "I just don't want to leave 11 base. The things I said about my childhood are all true. The only thing I didn't say is my gender. If 11 base accepts women, I wouldn't have kept hiding it. I don't want to leave, boss. I know I lied to everyone. You gave me a chance, but I really..." Feng Ling's hands clenched on the quilt. Maybe if it wasn't for that critical moment, I wouldn't have so easily told my secret, and only told it to you." Li Nanheng's expression was originally not good. However, when he heard her last sentence, which was only directed at him, the corners of his lips rose slightly when she turned her head away. "Only told it to me? What do you mean?" Feng Ling clenched her hands tightly. He didn't know whether she was nervous or embarrassed when she suddenly began to be honest, but she just didn't look into his eyes. She looked down at her hands and said, "It's just that I don't intend to let anyone else know about this matter. Boss, it's enough for you to know it alone. What's the difference between me knowing it alone and everyone else knowing it?" The man asked deliberately. Feng Ling could hear his intention, but she still had to answer, because, "Boss, didn't you say you like me?" When she said this, Feng Ling felt that this was the most embarrassing scene in her life in the past 10 years. Her voice was a little hoarse, so low that it was almost inaudible. "I just feel that I can't live up to your love, boss, so I have to be honest with you before I die." Chapter 970. Li Nanheng resisted the urge to smile and said with a smile, "You have to be honest before you die? Do you regret being so honest now that you find that you won't die?" "No, I didn't. Since I said it, I have to pay the price for what I did. If boss wants me to leave the base, I won't defend myself. I will leave." When Feng Ling said this, her nails dug into her palms. It was really difficult for her to say such words. Perhaps it was because he had just faced a life-and-death situation. Perhaps her obsession with the base, her so-called home, would no longer be so important. Li Nanheng looked at her. When did I say I want you to leave? Feng Ling paused and turned to look at him. Isn't the base's rule that women are not allowed in? Li Nanheng raised his eyebrows and didn't say anything more. He just looked at her. Let's talk about this after we return to the base. It's not up to you to decide whether to stay or leave, nor is it up to me to decide. I want to know, after pretending to be a man for so many years, have you never thought about when you will be discovered? No. She looked at him. I also want to know. Boss, you've been so calm after knowing my secret. You don't even look surprised. Did you already know? Li Nanheng snorted. Yes. She wouldn't guess. He didn't want to guess either. But what she could be sure of was that that night on the snowy mountain, he did not know that she was a woman. Otherwise, he would not have been so innocent after waking up and always suspected her. It was precisely because he didn't know that he didn't put the blame on her. But that's not necessarily the case anymore. Why is she thinking about that when she's not doing anything? Under Li Nanheng's indescribable gaze, Feng Ling raised her hand to tidy up the hospital gown on her body. Feeling that she was not wearing anything under the hospital gown, she was not used to the emptiness and did not feel safe, so she simply lifted the quilt and wrapped it under her neck. Then she lay down on the bed and whispered, "Boss, I want to rest." Seeing that she avoided the difficult questions and refused to say a word, Li Nanheng didn't force her. Even if he wanted to force her, now was not the time. Does the snake bite still hurt? He looked at the short-haired girl lying on the bed and changed the topic. Feng Ling tried to move her arm. It's much better. However, as soon as she finished speaking, the man who was sitting on the chair by the bed suddenly stood up, tugged down her quilt, and tugged down the loose collar of her hospital gown, revealing half of her shoulder. His movements were quick and smooth. Feng Ling was caught off guard and revealed half of her shoulder. Usually they were both men, so be it. But now, facing him as a woman, all of a sudden, she blushed and tried to pull her clothes up, but Li Nanheng frowned and said coldly, "Don't move. Let me see." Feng Ling. The man's fingers caressed the skin around her shoulders that was no longer red. Feng Ling pursed her lips and did not speak. At that time, in order to extract a portion of the poisonous serum, I had to make a cross-cut on your wound. Fortunately, the suture here was done well. After a few days of medication, the redness and swelling on the surface have disappeared, the man said as he turned his gaze back to her face. The girl's shoulder was half exposed and she seemed a little embarrassed. When she turned her head, the outline of her chin seemed to be written with all kinds of subtle awkwardness that only men and women would have. Li Nanheng looked at her with an incomprehensible smile in his eyes. He did not immediately pull her shoulders up but maintained this posture to look at her. Rest in Cambodia for a few more days, and then take the base's helicopter back to Los Angeles. Okay. Feng Ling still did not look at him. Her voice was a little muffled. She felt the slight coolness when her shoulder touched the air, and because her identity as a woman was exposed, she could not turn her head to meet his eyes no matter how hard she tried, so she could only keep tilting her head to talk. After returning to Los Angeles, don't go back to the base for the time being. Go back to my apartment to recuperate. As for your gender, we'll talk about it later. As Li Nanheng spoke, the tip of his thumb seemed to inadvertently rub the side of the girl's white, tender and round shoulder. Feng Ling suddenly shivered all over, suddenly raised her hand to push his hand away, and at the same time quickly pulled up the clothes on her shoulders, saying, "Boss, have you seen it? It really doesn't hurt. There's no need to see it again in the future, and there's a doctor to help me apply medicine. You don't have to worry anymore." Li Nanheng lowered his eyes to look at her. "When we were brothers, you could even sleep in the same bed, but now you've become a woman. You can't even see your shoulders?" Feng Ling, who was willing to sleep in the same bed as him when they were brothers? Which time was not forced by him. She had always maintained a certain distance and propriety in their brotherly love, okay? All along he was the one who had no propriety in touching her. She didn't speak but directly covered the quilt over her body, pulled it up to her neck and wrapped herself completely in it. Her eyes were still averted and she said sullenly, "No, boss, don't misunderstand." "Misunderstand what?" Li Nanheng resisted the urge to lower his head, pressed the girl into his arms and kiss her fiercely. He sat back on the chair, stretched his long legs casually, and looked at her from the corner of his eyes. "I do have a big misunderstanding and doubt in my heart. I need you to explain it to me." "What?" "In Rogers Pass, what happened that night when I had a high fever and was forced to drink by Fat Tai?" Feng Ling's expression did not change, but her voice was still a little sullen. "Nothing happened. I just took care of you for a whole night, and the next day, because I was not feeling well, I went to the tent next door to lie down for a few days. It was still not the truth. Li Nanheng could roughly guess what he should have done to her. Maybe he kissed, hugged, or pressed her on the bed, something like that. But he really couldn't recall too many memories of that night. He didn't know what he did. Was it just kissing and hugging on the bed, or did something really happen? So, after that, you seem to want to break up with me. Why are you angry with me? Li Nanheng glanced at her. The corner of Feng Ling's mouth twitched and her eyes flickered. Boss, when have I not been angry after you kissed me? Chapter 971. You'll be angry if I kiss you? And more or less. Before Feng Ling could finish her words, the man who was originally sitting on the chair by the bed suddenly stood up and approached her. With a speed that caught her off guard, he pressed her under his body and placed his hands on either side of the bed. He lowered his black eyes and looked at her at such a close distance. Their noses were almost touching, and the distance between their lips was also very close. She was startled and did not dare to speak. She just stared at him blankly, not understanding what he was suddenly doing. If I kiss you again now, will you still be angry? The man's eyes were somewhat evil and mischievous. He pressed her against the bed and had no intention of letting her avoid this topic. Feng Ling looked at the man in front of her in disbelief. She was so stiff that she did not dare to move or speak. Li Nanheng lowered his eyes to look at her. Let me try kissing you now, Feng Ling, boss? Her voice was a little tight. She tried to hide her head under the pillow and put her hands between their bodies. Don't mess around. When you were pretending to be a man, I kissed you many times. What? Can't I kiss you now? Li Nanheng smiled. Feng Ling turned her face away and could not push him away. She could only turn to pull the quilt up, cover her mouth with the quilt, and then put on a firm expression of refusal. Looking at her expression, Li Nanheng really wanted to kiss her until she couldn't breathe and until she cried and begged for mercy. However, seeing that her face was still pale because of excessive blood loss, he suppressed his desire to swallow her alive again and again. He suddenly lowered his head. When Feng Ling subconsciously closed her eyes, he did not pull the quilt covering her mouth away but turned to lean down to her ear, whispering, "You rest well for me. I'm not in a hurry. After you recover, we'll settle the score." Hearing his words, Feng Ling's blood temperature inexplicably soared, and because the man's breath brushed against her ear, all the hair on her body stood up. What a count! Feng Ling didn't know where the courage came from, but she suddenly said such an impulsive sentence. After saying it, she regretted it. Why would she ask that? The man chuckled by her ear, and his hoarse voice moved closer to her ear. The itchy and hot feeling made her shrink her neck, but she heard the man's lips graze her earlobe. You bent me and now you're straightening me. I have to ask for some compensation for my mental damage. The man's hoarse voice seemed to echo in her ears. Feng Ling shrank her neck to hide. However, just when she felt that she couldn't avoid it, Li Nanheng stood up and let her go. She instantly had more space to breathe. She turned to look at him, only to see that the man had returned to the chair by the bed and sat down. His unruly posture was as if he was deliberately teasing her by grabbing onto one of her pigtails. Yet after teasing her, he was still so calm and collected. At the beginning, Feng Ling's heart was a little upset because the secret of her gender was so openly known by him, but now not only did it not improve at all, but it also became even more upset. How could she let her heart become so unsettled because of a man? While Li Nanheng got up to pour water for her, she covered her face with the quilt and did not show her face for a long time. She just sulked. Li Nanheng took the cup back. Seeing her covering her face with the quilt, he said with a mocking smile, "It's useless to cover your face with the quilt. You can't go back, Miss Feng." Miss Feng covered in the quilt. When Feng Ling was finally allowed to leave the hospital and return to Los Angeles to recuperate, it had been nearly 10 days since she was bitten by the snake. For several days in a row, the food she ate was light and all kinds of blood-enriching food. Her mental state had improved a lot and she was no longer so haggard. Except for the occasional numbness on the arm bitten by the snake, there was no other problem. Before leaving Cambodia, Chin Siding came to see her and said that because the snake venom stayed in her body for too long, the nervous system of her body must have been affected. The temporary numbness was normal, which showed that her nervous system was actively recovering and would be fine in a few days. After returning to Los Angeles, Li Nanheng did not let Feng Ling directly return to the base. Even if he didn't say it, since the fat military commander was killed, she was very clear that although there were many people in the base who liked her and wanted to protect her, there were also many people who disliked her. It was certainly a good thing that Boss Lee gave her a secluded environment to recuperate. However, the fact that she could not return to the base for the time being made Feng Ling feel a little disappointed. Compared to the carefree life of eating and sleeping outside, she preferred to train in the base every morning and evening, throwing hot blood and sweat day after day. Although she was a woman, she still liked holding a gun in her hand. Unlike now, because he needed time to recover, he was so weak that he had to be helped into the car with a coat. Li Nanheng glanced at Feng Ling, who had just sat in the car. Now we've returned to Los Angeles. If there's nothing else I want to do, I'll drive back to the apartment. Feng Ling glanced at him. Boss, will my arm be crippled? Will I even be unable to pick up a sniper rifle in the future? Li Nanheng glanced at her arm. No. As he spoke, he waved his hand in front of her. Forget about the ligament injury in my wrist. Pulling Fat Tai out of the ice hole wouldn't leave any sequelae on my wrist. This is just a temporary nerve paralysis in your arm. Qin Sighting also said that it won't take long for you to recover. Feng Ling looked at his hand. Are you really all healed? Li Nanheng raised his hand and patted her gently on the head. When I carried you to the edge of the cliff in the Snake Valley, I used this hand to support you. Do you think I'm all healed? In fact, Feng Ling also knew that people like them who had been trained for a long time would recover much faster than ordinary people no matter what kind of injuries they suffered. She was relieved and moved her arm again. It's good that I can still pick up a sniper rifle. My sniper training has just reached the middle stage and I haven't finished it yet. I don't want to give up. Seeing that she wanted to stay in the base no matter what, Li Nanheng smiled. Then don't give up. Chapter 972. Li Nanheng didn't say anything more about whether she could return to the base or not. He drove her back to her apartment. Before entering the condo, Feng Ling glanced at the number of the elevator on the floor below his condo. She silently thought that if her body condition was still good, she should go out to look for furniture stores, buy some furniture, and then move in. Li Nanheng glanced at her. Don't think about living on the floor below. There's time to renovate and change the furniture. You've already recovered and can return to the base at any time. Feng Ling, she turned to look at him. She didn't say anything. How did he guess what she was thinking? Li Nanheng's cold brows moved. Do you really think I can't see through your little thoughts? Feng Ling, she walked into his apartment again. It was no different from before. The cold wind was blowing outside, but the temperature inside was as warm as spring. But now there seemed to be something different. For example, the last time she lived here, she was still a man. But now she moved in. Li Nanheng had brought her back knowing that she was a woman. It was another concept for a man and a woman to be alone. Boss. Feng Ling glanced at him. Li Nanheng glanced back at her. What's wrong? Feng Ling's lips moved. She wanted to say something, but she felt that it seemed too delicate. After all, she had lived here before and now her mentality had changed. Perhaps, although she wasn't sure, perhaps he had already known her secret. Otherwise, how could he not be surprised at all? Thinking of this, Feng Ling took a step back awkwardly. I'm still? Li Nanheng raised his brows. You want to move out? And? She nodded. Are you afraid that after I know you are a woman, I can't control myself and go to your place in the middle of the night to plot against you? No. If you want to move out, you can. Give me a convincing reason. Her legs were straight and her hands were by her sides. She looked as though she was being trained on the training ground of the base. She was very serious. I feel that Han Jin and Xiao Su should also know about it. I've been in Cambodia for so many days. Although the doctor didn't emphasize my gender, I saw that I'm a woman on the medical record. Xiao Su and the others must have seen it, so my matter will probably be spread out sooner or later. The elders of the Li family value your reputation very much. I don't want your reputation to be affected because of my own affairs. Li Nanheng's eyes were wide open, and his eyes were wide open. He looked at Li Nanheng and Li Nanheng. Li Nanheng sneered, threw the black duffel bag in his hand to the ground, and turned back to walk to her. When others suspected your sexual orientation, I didn't care about my reputation. Now I just brought a girl back to my place. What? Am I living for others to see? Or can other people's mouths hurt me even a little? Feng Ling looked at him. But the elders of the Li family care about it very much. If I had lived the way they told me to live since I was a child, you wouldn't see me now. The man approached and raised his hand to brush past her cheek and ear. When Feng Ling did not move, he directly slammed the door behind her with a ping sound. Then Li Nanheng turned back to the sofa. Don't think too much. Stay here first. I asked you to come here to recuperate. What do you think I want to do? Hearing his tone, Feng Ling felt that he was very righteous. If Feng Ling hadn't been deceived by this man's sanctimonious appearance, how would she have been dragged into the whirlpool of emotions that she had never understood again and again? In fact, she was still very confused. She didn't even know what kind of feeling she had for Boss Lee: gratitude, dependence, or love. But since he said so, she didn't think too much. She went up to open the duffel bag he put down, took out her clothes from it, and was about to return to the bedroom where she lived before. Li Nanhing's voice suddenly floated over from the side. "Don't you have any normal clothes to wear?" Feng Ling looked at the 2 sets of black uniforms and loose t-shirts in her arms and then at him. "What are normal clothes?" "Except for the base uniforms. The sportswear I'm wearing is very good." Li Nanhing raised his eyebrows. "Women's clothes?" "Feng Ling. I don't want to wear it. I have to go back to the base." "Only in front of me?" "No." Hearing such a firm refusal, Li Nanhing didn't speak but leaned against the shelf by the wall of the living room, looking at Feng Ling, who was dressed like a little boy. She probably didn't know that no matter what she wore, he could still get hard when he wanted to, whether it was men's clothes or women's clothes. As long as she was a woman inside, it didn't matter what she wore. "You've been rushing all the way back from Cambodia. Your physical fitness is not good now. Go to rest first." Li Nanhing looked at her and said lightly. She didn't expect that he would let her go so easily on this topic. Feng Ling was a little uncertain, but seeing that he really didn't want to say more, she took the clothes and turned around. When she was about to walk into the bedroom, Li Nanhing's voice floated over from behind. "It seems that it's not convenient for you to wear my clothes. I'll ask someone to buy you 2 sets of pajamas and home clothes, okay?" "Thank you, boss." Feng Ling said, quickly entered the bedroom and then quickly closed the door. In the evening, Feng Ling saw that someone from a nearby department store had sent a few bags of things over. She had just walked back and forth in the living room to maintain her physical activity and went to open the door. She took the bags and saw the signs on the bags. Knowing that they were sent from the nearest department store, she suspiciously carried the bags in and threw them on the sofa. "Boss, are these what you want?" She looked up at the man who came out of the kitchen with a coffee cup in his hand. Li Nanhing glanced at the sofa disapprovingly as he walked, said, "Are these for you?" and went straight into the study. Feng Ling looked at these things in front of her in surprise. Didn't he say that he would only buy 2 sets of pajamas for her? What was with these dozen or so bags? She picked up one of the bags in confusion. Inside was a set of pajamas, pink. Although it was not the kind of feminine style with various small flowers and small lace edges, she could tell it was a very plain and pink lady style at a glance. Looking at this set of pajamas, Feng Ling instantly remembered what Li Nanhing said just now and felt that she had been tricked by this man. She should have specially told him not to buy women's pajamas. Chapter 973. She opened another bag and found 2 pairs of shoes. Flat shoes, a pair of white sneakers, and a pair of casual black canvas shoes which matched well with any kind of clothes. They were also for women. When she opened the other bags, there weren't any clothes that were too girly. Most of them were sportswear that she liked to wear. However, even the sportswear was for women. From the color and style, it was obvious that it was for women. It was very different from the men's sportswear that she was wearing. The men's sportswear was flat, while the women's sportswear had curves in front of the chest and waist. The colors were also very simple and clean. They were styles and colors that she could accept. If these clothes were dresses or the like, Feng Ling would immediately run out to chase the people from the food department and throw the things back into their hands. She would definitely not accept them. Looking at these clothes, Feng Ling's lips curved up slightly. She casually picked up the 2 bags at the bottom and opened them. The moment she opened them, the smile on her face froze, and the corners of her mouth trembled. What was this? She picked up a pink women's underwear and looked at the 2 cups that seemed to be very suitable for her. Then she looked down at her chest that was not wrapped in a chest cloth. Feng Ling opened the other bag at the bottom. Sure enough, it was another woman's underwear. One was black and the other was pink. He had asked the people in the mall to send at least 2 sets of everything. Was this reserved for her to change into? She could accept women's sportswear and sneakers, or slightly feminine pajamas and pajamas. Anyway, she could accept them as long as they were not nightgowns, but this underwear, she had long been used to wearing a chest cloth. Except for the time when she deliberately dressed as a woman in the bar, she had never touched this kind of thing. Now it was so open and above board, Feng Ling couldn't help blushing. She stuffed all the things back into the bag and turned back to the bedroom without taking any of them. At night, when Li Nanhing came out from work, he saw those things piled up on the sofa, glanced at the closed door opposite, and walked over to knock on the door. After knocking for a while, there was no response. The man outside the door said indifferently, "Do you want me to open the door directly with the key?" After a moment of silence, the sound of footsteps could be heard, and then the door was opened. Feng Ling was holding a razor that she had found in his bedroom. Her expression was slightly awkward. Li Nanheng looked at the thing in her hand and then at her. "What do you want?" "My hair has grown quite a bit and I want to shorten it. Didn't you say that you often shave it yourself? I just want to try and see if I can shave my head flat." Feng Ling said as she picked up the razor in her hand. "This is charged, right? Is it out of battery? Why can't I do it?" Looking at her serious expression, Li Nanheng raised his hand to take the razor back and threw it onto the sofa not far behind him. The razor rolled onto the carpet, making a muffled sound. "Why do you need to shave your head? Your hair is just below your ears." "There's no need to shave it," Li Nanheng said and glanced at her clothes. "Didn't I buy you pajamas? Why are you still wearing this?" Feng Ling was still wearing the same set of clothes that she used to wear when she lived here. It was his home clothes. However, she was clearly wearing a small vest inside. She was no longer in a vacuum state because of the lack of clothes. "You'd better ask the people from the mall to take those things back. I don't want to wear them." Feng Ling raised her hand and tugged at her hair. "Boss, gender is actually just a concept. I've regarded myself as a man since I was young. I'm used to it. I can't get used to wearing women's clothes now." Li Nanheng snorted. "I'm not forcing you to wear those things that you can't get used to for the time being. They are all sports styles that you like. If you don't like them, you can throw them away tomorrow morning. There's no need to send them back." "Feng Ling," the man glanced at her indifferently. "Are you planning to be a man for the rest of your life?" Feng Ling looked back at him. "I don't know. I don't have any concept. When I was young, I lived with wolves. Later, I was brought out by others. I only know how to protect myself. I don't know anything else. I just want to ask you. If you want to be a man, do you want to try to change back into a woman and live as a normal girl of 17 or 18 years old?" A normal girl of 17 or 18 years old. Was she? Could she? Li Nanheng raised his hand and touched her head. "Don't shave your hair anymore. Many boys also like to keep their hair long. There's no need for you to deliberately make it very short to hide yourself. Those who know already know, and those who don't know will know sooner or later. It may be worth it to use your hair as the price to hide yourself in the past, but it's not worth it now." Feng Ling didn't speak again. "I'll give you one night. Think about it carefully. Do you want to persist as a man or return to the life of a normal girl? I can help you with whatever you want. Think about it yourself." Feng Ling didn't quite understand what he meant and just looked at him blankly. Could he help her with whatever she wanted? Even if he wanted to live like a man forever? Seeing the man's eyes, Feng Ling didn't immediately answer but looked out of the door. Li Nanheng walked out, also glanced at the bags piled on the sofa, and then looked back at her who had already walked out of the door. "Put these away first. The cabinet in your bedroom is empty. Put them all in. If you want to wear them one day, at least there will be a few clothes for you to wear." With that, the man didn't say anything more and went straight into the study. The door of the study was not closed. Feng Ling knew that Boss Li was usually busy talking to people in the base hall or sending documents in the study. There was a computer in the study. He had to deal with some emergencies in the base and the Li Corporation at any time. Feng Ling walked out and stood by the sofa to look at those things. In the end, she didn't want to let down Boss Li's kindness. From the style of these clothes, she could tell that he was actually letting her slowly adapt to them instead of immediately buying a dress and forcing her to wear it. She took those things back to the bedroom one by one and walked back and forth very quietly, for fear of disturbing Boss Li. When the last bag was moved, she quietly closed the door and put the things in the bag into the wardrobe. She held the pink underwear in her hand and was about to put it in, when she suddenly paused. Feng Ling looked at the underwear in her hand that even the cup size was very suitable. She didn't have to think about it to know how Li Nanheng knew her size. When they kissed in the bar, he raised his hand and touched it for a long time. Chapter 974. She hesitated in the room for a long time. Feng Ling had never been so hesitant since she was a child when she killed someone with a gun for the first time. Holding the pink lingerie in her hand, after a while, she looked up at the door, making sure that Li Nanheng was busy and would not come in, nor would he come to see her. After thinking for a while, she turned into the bathroom, stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling mirror, and put on the lingerie. Probably because she was young, the skin of a 17 or 18-year-old girl was as white as jade. Wearing this kind of pink lingerie that few people could handle, she looked really beautiful. Feng Ling seemed to have seen this kind of lingerie in the wild magazines on the roadside. A young girl wearing this kind of lingerie was youthful and sexy. After putting on this lingerie, Feng Ling looked out of the bathroom. After making sure that Li Nanheng did not come in, she ran to the wardrobe, picked up the light-colored pajamas, put them on, and turned back to the mirror to look at herself. The pajamas were long-sleeved and long pants, pink and tender, and no part of her body was exposed. However, because she was wearing lingerie, her chest, which had been wrapped by the chest wrapping cloth, was now in a normal, soft, and round state. She was used to having a flat chest, but suddenly, she blushed and her heart beat faster. How could she go out like this? Could she let Bosley take a look? The figure of the girl in the mirror was exactly what a woman should look like. Although her hair was short, it had grown past her ears. She only needed to go out and trim her hair, and she would look like a very playful short-haired little woman. She wore this set of clothes in the room for a long time. In the end, Feng Ling did not rush to take it off. Instead, she lay on the bed and felt the clothes. In fact, she usually wrapped her chest cloth very tightly. In the beginning, she would feel uncomfortable and breathless when she lay down, but after a long time she got used to it. Now wearing the lingerie, she didn't feel uncomfortable at all but felt very relaxed. Was she going to be a woman? Feng Ling kept lying, lowered her head to look at the pajamas on her body, and then raised her hand to look at her hand. Although her fingers were slender and white, when she opened her palm, she could still see the light calluses inside. He suddenly recalled the time when he was brought out of the jungle, and the experiences he had in the past 10 years. Be a normal 17 or 18-year-old girl. Could she? Lying on the bed, he didn't know when he fell asleep. When he woke up, it was already past 10 o'clock at night. Recently, she had been resting in the hospital and often slept, so sleeping had become a habit. She hadn't gone back to the base for training for a short period of time, but now her biological clock had been completely disrupted. She could actually sleep in the evening and wake up at night. This was something she had never experienced before. In the past, he would wake up at 5 in the morning for morning training, and he had to sleep before 10 at night. After waking up, he sat up and felt as though there was something extra in front of his chest. Actually, it wasn't anything extra. It was just that it wasn't wrapped tightly anymore. There were 2 more lumps in front of his eyes. She got up and turned on the light. She stood at the door and hesitated for a long time before she opened the door and walked out. Although it was already late, it was clear that Li Nanheng was still awake. The lights in the living room were on, and so were the lights in the study. There was a faint aroma of food in the air. Feng Ling looked around and saw several dishes on the dining table close to the kitchen, but they were all covered with a layer of insulated bowls. Was that the dinner Bosley asked someone to send over? Did he specially leave it for her? Feng Ling was about to walk over when the door of the study opened. Li Nanheng came out with a stack of documents in his hand. When he suddenly saw the person standing at the dining table, he paused and suddenly turned to look at her. First, he saw the light-colored pajamas on Feng Ling. Although they were pajamas and pajamas, they were a little like a half-length doll's dress, which looked a little playful and cute. More importantly, she didn't wrap the breast wrap to cover her healthy and normal chest, but put on that set of underwear. The girl's perfect figure was not affected by the restraint of these breast wrappings at all. Even though it was just a set of pajamas and a silhouette that had restored her original figure, Li Nanheng was still dazed for a few seconds. When Feng Ling suddenly reached out to open the food on the table, he put down the document in his hand and walked over. I knew you were asleep. Someone sent dinner over, so I didn't wake you up. Sit down first. I'll heat up the food. No, it's good to eat like this. Feng Ling looked back at Li Nanheng. Although she felt a little embarrassed, she still said, I don't think it's particularly cold. It's edible. Heat it up first. Li Nanheng patted away her hand that was about to cover the food and took it into the kitchen. Seeing that the man who clearly didn't know how to cook was preparing to heat up the dishes for her, Feng Ling stood outside and helped bring the food in. She took a few steps back and looked at the man who was standing by the stove with a frown. It was clear that he didn't know how to cook these things but was trying his best not to show his weakness. For some reason she felt that Bosley was a little cute like this. If he didn't know how to cook, he didn't need to be so omnipotent. It was enough as long as he was her Bosley. Besides, she didn't know how to cook herself. It was already a success if she didn't have a stomachache when she cooked a bowl of noodles. It wasn't that difficult to heat up the dishes. She took out the pot, put it on the stove and put it in the microwave. Everything was done in 5 minutes. Feng Ling didn't help much and went to the table to wait for the food to be eaten. After the food was served by the man again, Li Nanheng brought her a bowl and chopsticks. Feng Ling took it, thanked him and began to eat. However, after taking 2 bites, she suddenly felt a pain on the back of her hand. She was startled and raised her eyes abruptly, only to see the man who suddenly took out the chopsticks in her hand and slapped the back of her hand. "Boss? Dressed like this, are you going to be a normal girl?" The man stood by the table and looked down at her. Feng Ling didn't understand what he meant, but looked at him and said directly, "I just want to try it first." "Since you want to try it, then I want to try to be a normal girl," Li Nanhing said as he put the chopsticks back on the table and said indifferently, "Change your eating speed and movements. Aren't you a rough man who wolfs down food? Aren't you afraid of choking when eating so fast?" "I'm in a hurry to go to training every day. I'm afraid of being late. I'm used to it. Eat slowly." The man sat by the table, sipped his coffee and watched her pick up the chopsticks strangely again. He raised his eyebrows when she didn't notice, and there was an imperceptible smile on his lips. Disciplining the little wolf girl, this job he found for himself was really not bad. Chapter 975. Feng Ling didn't expect to be asked to eat. She didn't know whether she felt wronged or not, but when she saw that Boss Li was drinking coffee and then looked at the food in front of her, she didn't say anything and did as he asked. She picked up a mouthful of food, put it into the bowl and ate slowly. Looking at her aggrieved but trying to cooperate, Li Nanheng smiled. "You don't have to chew slowly, but at least you don't have to eat quickly like Kay and the others. It's not good for your stomach to eat too fast, remember?" She didn't say anything but lowered her eyes and didn't look at him. He saw that Feng Ling had been restraining the amount and speed of picking up food with chopsticks and deliberately slowed down when chewing. Although she didn't want to be obedient, in fact, she was still trying to cooperate. What a stubborn but soft-hearted little girl. After eating, Feng Ling put down the bowl and chopsticks and was about to take them to the kitchen to wash. Li Nanhing asked her to throw them into the dishwasher first. She stood in front of the dishwasher for a long time and studied where the switch was and how to use it. Suddenly, a hand came from behind and helped her open the dishwasher. As soon as she put the bowl in and closed the door, she heard a beep and the machine began to wash automatically. Feng Ling was about to turn away when she realized that the man didn't step back after helping her open the dishwasher. Instead, the moment she turned around, he held her in his arms. Feng Ling stiffened and was about to struggle, but the man held her tightly from behind and put his chin on the top of her head. "Don't move, boss." Feng Ling was a little embarrassed by this seemingly warm hug. This feeling is very good. Hold me for a while." The man's words were so straightforward that Feng Ling didn't even have time to blush and her heart felt as if a jar of honey had been pushed over. She stood still and looked down at the man's hand on her lower abdomen. "Boss, although I am a woman, but you also like me. Don't explain too much. I understand." The man directly finished her words. Feng Ling, understand what? Even she didn't understand. Did this man have to be so narcissistic? She suddenly wanted to turn around and push him away, but the man hugged her tightly. "Be good, don't move. It's just a hug. I didn't do anything to you." "No, boss, I want to explain to you clearly I didn't. Nothing?" The man's low voice landed on her head. "Even if you're very ignorant about feelings, you should be clear that apart from me, you're very repulsed by anyone getting close to you. Do you really want me to tell you everything? At that time, I'm afraid that you'll be so shy that you'll hide in your room and not come out. Don't think that others can't see through your thoughts just because you've been pretending to be a man for so long. You're always transparent in front of me, huh? Little girl." The man's last few words made Feng Ling's expression instantly uncomfortable, but it seemed that what he said was very reasonable. Did she like him that much? "If you want to go back to 11 base, go back. If you don't want to go back, just stay here with me. You'll never leave me. Don't think about leaving me. Whether in the base or outside, you're mine." Li Nanhing said and directly lowered his head to kiss the girl's face. Feng Ling was about to dodge, but the man only kissed her on the cheek. She slightly turned her head away, and the man simply hugged her tighter and bent down to kiss her several times on the face. "Are you still going to dodge?" Why couldn't she dodge? Who would ever confess in such a shameful manner? He was really a straight man. Just when Feng Ling in his arms didn't know what to do, Li Nanhing's cell phone rang at this moment. The man originally wanted to force the little girl to the corner to give her a good kiss. At first, he ignored the cell phone ringing, but when Feng Ling reminded him, he didn't leave. It was not until the second time that his cell phone rang that he realized there must be something urgent calling at this time. The man finally let go of the girl in his arms and returned to the study to answer the phone. Feng Ling hurriedly left the kitchen and rushed all the way back to the bedroom to close the door. Li Nanheng was answering the phone when he heard the sound of the door closing outside. He turned his head in that direction and saw Feng Ling's back as she trotted all the way back to the room, and the corners of his mouth rose slightly. Feng Ling didn't know how long she would live in Boss Li's place, but he really didn't intend to let her live elsewhere. Several times he returned to the base to deal with things, and she also wanted to go back with him, but he sent her back to the apartment. After repeating this several times, she knew that she really couldn't go back for the time being, so she simply gave up. After more than 10 days, Feng Ling felt that living in the apartment was about to become moldy. Although there were a lot of fitness equipment at home, when she was alone at home, she didn't even have anyone to talk to. She didn't want to watch TV or play computer games to kill time, so she simply went to the hairdresser near the apartment to have her hair trimmed. It was not the kind that was very short but slightly trimmed. When she cut her hair, the hairdresser asked enthusiastically while helping her cut her hair, "Beauty, do you like short hair very much? Your face is very beautiful and your short hair is also very delicate and beautiful, but I feel that if you slowly change to long hair, you will be particularly stunning. Do you want to get a haircut? It's not expensive at all." "No need." Feng Ling ignored him, sitting there and looking down at the magazine she took casually. The hairdresser said with a regretful expression, "Why do the more beautiful girls like to wear short hair nowadays?" "Beautiful." Feng Ling raised her head to look at herself in the mirror. She was wearing the women's sportswear. In fact, it was also sportswear, but from the color and style, it could be seen that it was very different from the men's sportswear. In addition, she didn't deliberately speak in a rough voice, so the hairdresser could tell at a glance that she was a woman. So was her cross-dressing journey about to come to an end? After the haircut, Feng Ling raised her hand to rub her hair, which was not much shorter, and was about to go back when suddenly her cell phone rang. Seeing that it was a call from Xiao Fei, she directly picked it up. "Where are you?" Xiao Fei's voice was a bit hoarse. Feng Ling was puzzled by his voice and his tone that seemed to be in a bad mood, so she directly answered, "In Boss Li's apartment." "You didn't go back to the base?" "No, I haven't gone back. Don't you know?" Xiao Fei immediately sighed with a smile. "I left the base on the 3rd day after you went to Cambodia. Didn't I tell you last time that my time in the base was up and it was time to go home?" "Yes, I remember. Since you didn't go back to the base, why don't we meet?" Chapter 976. Xiao Fei didn't seem to be in a good mood. Li Nanhing's face flashed across Feng Ling's mind, and she felt that she shouldn't see Xiao Fei. "It's not convenient for me. I'd better not see you. You have your own life outside. I wish you all the best. I'm nearby. I'll be there soon. Wait for me." Xiao Fei hung up the phone. Feng Ling stood still, looking up at the cars outside the apartment, a little confused. Drill Master Qiao seemed to like her a little, but he didn't force her to do anything. As long as she didn't want to do something, he would be a gentleman and avoid her. Just now it was clear that she didn't want to see him, but why did he suddenly become so domineering? It seemed that he had to see him. Feng Ling walked to the flower bed near the parking lot. As the weather had turned cold, the flowers in the flower bed had turned yellow. She sat by the side and reached out to pluck the yellow leaves one by one to pass the time. A car approached and then a car honked beside her. She looked up and saw a white Bentley parked in front of her. When she was puzzled, the car window rolled down and Xiao Fei's face appeared. "Why are you in a daze? Get in the car." Seeing her clothes, the man in the car was surprised for a moment. Feng Ling looked at him. She hadn't seen him for a long time and felt that Xiao Fei's eyes seemed a little red. She got up and walked to the car door. "Drill Master Qiao, you, Drill Master? I've already left the base. There is no Drill Master here, only Xiao Fei." Xiao Fei casually put one hand on the steering wheel and looked at her with a smile. At this time, Feng Ling approached the car door and was a little close to him, so she smelled alcohol on his body. She immediately looked at his hand on the steering wheel. "Did you drink?" "A little, not much." Xiao Fei raised his eyebrows and looked at her calmly. "Get in the car. I'll take you out for a ride. I heard that there are a lot of things going on in the base recently. It's impossible for Li Nanheng to accompany you here all day. It must be very boring for you to stay here all day. You drank. Don't drive. Where do you live? I'll send you back." Feng Ling didn't intend to sit on the co-pilot's side but stood by the car door on his side. Xiao Fei raised his eyebrows and looked at her. "If I ask you to get in the car, then get in. Why are you talking so much? I didn't drink much. I promise I'll be safe. Nothing will happen." "No, you drank." Feng Ling, Xiao Fei called her name. "Listen to me and get in the car. Go sit in the front passenger seat. I'll drive you back." Feng Ling was very persistent. There was no other emotion in her eyes. She just didn't want the people she knew to have an accident because of drunk driving. Seeing her insistence, Xiao Fei's eyes paused on her for a moment, and then the corners of his mouth curved up. Okay. With that, he pushed open the car door and got out of the car. When he walked past her, he looked at her delicate and feminine short hair, then at her sportswear and white sneakers. He walked around the car and sat down beside the passenger seat. Feng Ling sat in the driver's seat, fastened her seat belt and asked after he got in the car, "Where do you live?" "Turn on the GPS. I'm not familiar with the environment of downtown Los Angeles. Without the GPS, even if you tell me the address, I may not be able to find it." "Li Nanheng knew you were a woman long ago?" Xiao Fei didn't answer but asked. Feng Ling moved her hand away from the buckle of the seat belt and turned to look at him. "What do you mean long ago?" "I'm not sure, but now that you're dressed like this and live here, he obviously knows." Xiao Fei didn't ask much but said, "When you were in the base you were young, so it was understandable that others couldn't tell whether you were a man or a woman, but as you gradually grew up, many things couldn't be hidden, so it's not surprising that you were seen through. But according to Li Nanheng's attitude toward you, I suspect that he had long known it but didn't point it out." Feng Ling thought about it and didn't ask much, nor did she mention anything about Li Nanheng. Regardless of whether she knew about it earlier or later, she was dressed like this, which meant that she already knew about it. As for whether she knew about it earlier or later, she didn't have any particular thoughts. Anyway, it wasn't the first time that man had done all kinds of beastly things to her. Regardless of whether she was a man or a woman, just the act of him forcing her to help him with her hands was already very beastly. Why would there be a need to differentiate between a man and a woman? "Where do you live?" Feng Ling changed the topic and pointed to the screen of the car navigation with her eyes. Xiao Fei raised his hand, clicked on the navigation a few times, and randomly set a target location. "Let's go here." Feng Ling glanced at it and saw that the destination was a hotel. She didn't think much and drove out of the condominium. On the way, although Xiao Fei's body reeked of alcohol, it wasn't too strong or unpleasant. He sat quietly in the front passenger seat and casually leaned against the seat. He didn't look ahead but at Feng Ling, who was driving. Feng Ling would be very serious in everything she did, including driving. At first, she didn't pay much attention to his gaze, but after being stared at for a long time, she still felt a little uncomfortable. "Drillmaster Qiao. Xiao Fei. Or you can call me Brother Qiao like Kay and the others." Seeing that she was not used to it, he said again. "Okay, Brother Qiao." Feng Ling looked ahead and said while driving, "I heard other drill masters in the base say that people who leave the base, if they don't go to the military or the police but go back to work in a profession unrelated to the military, it's better not to see each other in the future. On the one hand, it's to avoid suspicion and disputes in the future. After all, you know that many secrets in the base can't be leaked, and you can't casually contact other people. With your current identity, it's not suitable for you to have too much contact with 11 base. Although both of us are tight-lipped, there are rules after all, so you'd better not see me in the future." Xiao Fei looked at her serious expression as she spoke, and the corner of his mouth hooked up. "Your straightforward temper is really hurtful. I just want to see you. It's very simple and I don't have any other thoughts. It's not just a simple meeting. Then what do I have to do? Do I have to be not simple?" Feng Ling didn't quite understand what he meant by not being simple. She just continued to drive and didn't ask more about things she didn't understand. "If I'm really not simple, even Li Nanheng may not be able to guard against me," Xiao Fei suddenly said meaningfully. Chapter 977. While waiting for the red light, Feng Ling turned to look at him. "What's not simple?" Xiao Fei smiled. "I had a party last night and didn't sleep all night. Send me to that hotel first. I'll tell you when I get there." Feng Ling was a little wary. "I won't send you back to your room. I'll only send you downstairs." "Is downstairs on the first floor? Was there a room on the first floor of the hotel?" And Feng Ling noticed the name of this hotel. It seemed to be a very famous and luxurious 7-star hotel in Los Angeles. The first, second, and third floors of this kind of hotel were mostly banquet rooms or official banquets. How could there be a room? When they were about to arrive at the hotel, Xiao Fei turned to look at other places outside the car window and said hoarsely with exhaustion and hangover, "My parents arranged a blind date for me but I don't like it. There will be a dinner party in the hotel tonight. I may need to borrow you for a night." Feng Ling was still driving intently. "What do you mean? Lend me? I know Boss Li likes you and you obviously have feelings for Boss Li." Xiao Fei paused for a moment. "A melon that is forcefully picked won't be sweet. I won't force you, but you might really have to suffer tonight. The dowry is my girlfriend. You just have to get through this in front of my family. Feng Ling almost slammed on the brakes. She calmed down, turned to look at him as if he were crazy, and then continued to drive. Impossible. Tonight is a charity dinner held by several major Chinese families in Los Angeles. In fact, it's just a way for these big families to get together. It's not so complicated. You don't have to change your clothes. You just need to go. I won't go. I'll leave after I send you to the hotel. They're almost here. You still want to leave? Brother Chow, you know my temper. No one can force me to do things I don't want to do. Then what if I force you to owe me a favor now? What favor? I've helped you hide the secret for so long, but I haven't done anything to you because I know this secret. I clearly like you, but I don't want to force you. I don't force you and I don't interfere. I just let you and Boss Lee show off their affection in front of me. Even if you say that I'm morally blackmailing you, you have to help me tonight. Even if you don't help me, I have to tie you up. Feng Ling pursed her lips. I don't really understand why you're using such a method to get away with it. If you don't want to go on a blind date, you can just say it. Right now, it's just a temporary decision. Let's use this dinner party as an opportunity to meet each other. It's not the time to explain. The most tactful way to refuse a blind date is for me to bring my girlfriend with me. You don't have to do anything. As long as you're a woman and stand by my side, that's enough. Then can't you just find a random female friend? They can't. What? Because I don't like it. Standing beside me, I don't feel like I'm in love at all. It's so unnatural. No matter how slow Feng Ling was when it came to relationships, after saying so much, she finally understood what he meant. So he specially called to ask where she was, drove to pick her up, and didn't sleep for the whole night. He sat by the side and looked at her, playing the drunk card and the bitter card. Was it all just to let her pretend to be his girlfriend tonight? She hadn't even learned how to be a normal girl. How could she pretend to be someone else's girlfriend? Feng Ling didn't say more. After sending him to the hotel, she unbuckled her seatbelt and got out of the car. Feng Ling, seeing that she was about to leave without saying anything, Xiao Fei got out of the car and quickly walked over to block her way. Can't you do me a favor? I can't help you with this kind of favor. Feng Ling raised her eyes to look at the man who was much taller than her. I don't know how to play this kind of role. This kind of thing is too embarrassing. I don't know how to do it and I can't do it. You don't have to say anything. Just stand by my side tonight. I can't. Xiao Fei watched her for a while and did not speak. He took a step to the side and gave way to her. Feng Ling looked at him. Brother Xiao, it's not that I don't want to help you, but I really can't do it. It's okay. I'll send a driver to send you back. Xiao Fei said and picked up the phone. Just now, Feng Ling had been avoiding him. Now that he was standing in front of her, she realized that he really didn't sleep all night. He was in a bad mood and the smell of alcohol on him was even more obvious. If it weren't because he was really annoyed with Xiao Fei's self-discipline in the base, he definitely wouldn't have a hangover after staying up all night. Was he really distressed? I can take a taxi back myself. I know the address of the apartment. Hearing her tone as if she was very familiar with Li Nanheng's apartment, Xiao Fei paused and didn't say anything. His long fingers had already dialed a number on his cell phone. It seemed that he really wanted to call a driver over. Seeing that he didn't say anything, Feng Ling pursed her lips and walked up to him. Brother Xiao, I really don't know how to pretend to be your girlfriend. If you really need my help, I'm afraid that I'll mess up and make you embarrassed. Hearing the wavering in her words, Xiao Fei turned to look at her. Are you willing to help me? Feng Ling. Just take it as returning the favor. Xiao Fei smiled. There are still a few hours before the banquet tonight. If you're willing, it's not bad to change into a gown, but with your character you definitely won't change. So be it. Anyway, you're a beautiful and clean girl without makeup. My parents will definitely see that I really like you when they see you. A melon that is forcefully picked won't be sweet. Once the effect is achieved, they won't find another blind date for me. Hearing this, Feng Ling recalled that Li Nanheng had said he liked her. It seemed that all the men around her were so straightforward. Perhaps it was because they all came from 11 base that they didn't hide anything when they were together. If he liked her, then he liked her. There was nothing to hide. They were very calm. But it was this calmness that made Feng Ling realize that she accepted Li Nanheng's love and even felt her heart tremble. But for Xiao Fei's love, she was only limited to gratitude and wanted to retreat. Was this the so-called difference in Li Nanheng's words? Thinking of Li Nanheng, Feng Ling turned to look at the hotel behind her. Boss Lee said that he wouldn't come back today. Did he return to the Li family or the base or something else? It shouldn't be possible to meet him in such a place. So even if she helped Xiao Fei, it shouldn't be a big deal as long as Boss Li didn't find out. Otherwise she might be in trouble. Chapter 978. Xiao Fei didn't force Feng Ling to change her clothes. Although it would take several hours for the dinner party to start, he knew Feng Ling's character, so he didn't tell her which room to rest in. He only booked the VIP lounge next to the banquet hall on the first floor for her to rest in. Feng Ling sat on the sofa and looked at her cell phone. Xiao Fei sometimes answered calls from his family and sometimes answered calls from his new work. The two didn't communicate much. Or Xiao Fei wanted to say something to her, but Feng Ling kept looking down at her cell phone and didn't talk much. For her, helping him was just helping him and she didn't want to talk about other things. Although Feng Ling looked like a soft persimmon that was easy to bully, in fact her bones were the hardest to bully. No one could easily touch her bones. It was up to her whether she wanted to do it or not. As for the rest, there was no need to say anything that was too cumbersome. There was no need to explain or say any polite words. An hour before the dinner party began, Feng Ling sat here and was a little sleepy. She closed her eyes and rested for a while. Hearing footsteps approaching, she opened her eyes and saw Xiao Fei coming over with a cup of coffee. Have a cup of coffee? Xiao Fei put the coffee cup on the table next to her. Seeing that she didn't continue to look at her cell phone, he sat on the chair closest to her. After I left the base, I rarely contacted the people in the base. I just received a call from the base and asked about you. You were seriously injured in Cambodia. I was wondering why you seemed to be in a different state from before. Has the snake venom been removed? How are your shoulders and arms now? Are there any sequelae? I'm fine. I'm much better than when I first came back. At first, one arm was a little numb, but recently the numbness has decreased a lot. If I do some rehabilitation training I should be fine, Feng Ling said and looked at him. As Feng Ling spoke she looked at him. Your family is also doing business, right? Does that mean that you will no longer have any contact with military matters in the future? Almost. I was sent to the base because I was too weak when I was a child, and my parents wanted me to have a place to exercise, Xiao Fei said with a smile. Xiao Fei said with a smile, I didn't expect that in the end. I didn't want to leave. If it weren't for my parents' poor health, I might have continued to compete with Li Nanhing in the base for a year or two. He didn't mention when Li Nanhing knew her secret. It seemed to be a tacit understanding between men. They didn't need to talk too much, but they definitely understood each other very well. But fair play. Feng Ling shifted her gaze away from his face and continued to look at her phone. Xiao Fei knew that her attitude was a very straightforward rejection. He was already used to it, so he just sat beside her and smiled. Later at the banquet, just stand beside me. When I introduce you to people, just smile and nod. It's okay if you don't speak. Yes. Many famous Chinese families in Los Angeles will come today. Have you seen the Feng family? It's a coincidence. I said that there aren't many Chinese surnamed Feng in Los Angeles, but it's a coincidence that your surname is Feng. Xiao Fei said as he looked at Feng Ling's face. The Feng family will also come today. Since we share the same surname, maybe we will be relatives within 100 years. You can meet your relatives. Feng Ling only took it as a joke. Since we share the same surname, we are relatives? If the little jade pendant on my body was engraved with the character, Xiao, then am I your biological sister now? Xiao Fei raised his eyebrows. What jade pendant? It's nothing. It's just a jade pendant that I've been wearing since I could remember. There's a character on it, so I just took that character as my surname. Feng Ling smiled lightly. Or maybe it's not my surname at all. Maybe I'm the reincarnation of a jinx, or maybe my parents thought there was something wrong with me and hired a master to seal me with a jade pendant. One character has too many meanings. It's not necessarily a surname, so I don't think too much about people with the same surname as me. Besides, how can it be so coincidental to find relatives? If a daughter of a big family like the Feng family is lost, people outside won't know? I really don't know. In fact, the bigger the family, the more they will hide some of the family's scandals and secrets. I only know that the Feng family has an eldest daughter named Feng Mingzhu, and my understanding of this family is limited. I only know that they are almost as famous as the Li family and the Mo family in the Chinese community in Los Angeles. Before Xiao Fei finished speaking, someone knocked on the door. He got up and went out. A moment later he came back and said, the banquet has entered the preparation stage and is about to start. My parents' car is outside. Now come out with me. Feng Ling stood up and looked down at her clothes. Is this okay? No problem. Xiao Fei said and reached out to grab her arm. In a while, no matter if I hold you or hold your hand, you have to behave normally. Don't push me away. Otherwise you will lose face. Feng Ling, I'll try my best. Don't try your best, baby. You're my girlfriend now. Xiao Fei gave her a knowing look. The corner of Feng Ling's mouth twitched and she secretly glared at him. However, Xiao Fei instantly smiled. He took her hand and pulled her to his side. Then he led her out of the lounge. The Qiao family's chauffeur drove 2 business cars over and stopped outside the hotel. Qiao Fei's parents got out of the car, but before they could enter, they were suddenly attracted by the 2 figures that appeared in front of them. They looked carefully and saw Qiao Fei, and then they saw the short-haired girl who was holding his hand and standing intimately with him. This. Mother Qiao was stunned. "Ah Fei, this is my girlfriend?" Qiao Fei answered directly. At the same time he smiled, revealing a mouthful of white teeth. He did not look as strict and reserved as he was in the base. Instead he was strangely much more carefree, elegant and cute. Mother Qiao immediately looked at Feng Ling in surprise. When she heard Xiao Fei said that he had a girlfriend, she didn't believe it. How could her son have a girlfriend in a place like 11 Base where all the men were single and tough? Even if he had a girlfriend, it would be some delicate girl or some innocent little girl that he had saved outside. However, he didn't expect that this so-called girlfriend would appear in front of them for the first time. She was wearing clean sportswear, and her face was bare of makeup. Her hair was also short. But even so, she looked like a very fair and beautiful girl. Her hairstyle could not hide the gentle and delicate temperament of a young girl in her bones. Chapter 979. She was fair and pretty, but her personality seemed to be very quiet. She didn't look like a spoiled or annoying girl at first glance. Although Mother Qiao was dissatisfied with her son bringing his girlfriend here, she didn't say anything to her but turned her eyes to Xiao Fei again. "Is she really your girlfriend?" "Absolutely." Xiao Fei put his arm around Feng Ling's shoulder. Feng Ling didn't move but put on a faint smile. In her heart she murmured, "This is a brother, a brother, a brother." In the past, it was normal for her to put her arm around her brother's shoulder. Xiao Fei had also put his arm around her like this before, but they were just brothers. Father Qiao didn't look good. "You're going against us. Didn't I tell you a few days ago to come and meet her? If you really don't like her you can talk about it. But now you directly brought your girlfriend back. Are you asking us to slap her in the face? I'm just expressing my position. As for what you should do and say today, it's your business. But my girlfriend is here. For the sake of everyone's dignity, you'd better not talk about irrelevant topics such as marriage, blind dates, or getting to know each other." Qin Haodong said with a frown. "It's better not to talk about that." Xiao Fei's tone sounded like a reminder, but Feng Ling could more or less hear his unhappiness with his parents' decision. If he was really in a good mood, he wouldn't have stayed up all night drinking outside last night. Seeing his attitude, Feng Ling was sure that he really just wanted her to do him a favor, so the little resistance in her heart disappeared a little. She tried to cooperate with him both in action and expression. "You." Father Qiao was about to reprimand her with a cold face. At this time, Mother Qiao gently tugged at her husband's leader and said in a low voice, "Forget it. This girl looks very honest. She doesn't look like someone who will make trouble at the dinner party. Don't talk too much. If Ah Fei really likes her you can't force him. Let's go in first. Everyone is here. Don't let them wait too long." Father Qiao restrained his temper, glared at them again and entered the door with Mother Qiao. When they entered, Feng Ling commented in a low voice, "Your parents don't look like people who are difficult to deal with. Why are you so distressed?" "My mom likes girls who are honest and well-behaved. She doesn't think much of those young ladies from prestigious families. She just wants to introduce me to a girl who matches her family background. I'm not interested and I don't have the time, so you can be my shield for the time being. Okay, you're the type that she likes. At least tonight she won't target you. You can stay here with peace of mind." Feng Ling nodded. Just as he was about to follow them in, a long Rolls-Royce approached from afar and stopped in front of the hotel. Feng Ling was about to walk inside when she seemed to see a familiar figure from the corner of her eye. She looked back and saw Mrs. Feng Qinqiu getting out of the car. She had only met Mrs. Feng a few times, but for some reason she instinctively felt that Mrs. Feng must be a very gentle person. But every time they chatted, she didn't understand what they said. Didn't they say that there was only one daughter in the Feng family? Feng Ling had never thought much about those topics. However, when she saw Mrs. Feng, she instinctively paused and looked back at the person who continued to get out of the car. Qin Xiu's mother was also in the car, and she was the last to get out. Behind her there was another sports car. Feng Mingzhu got out of the driver's seat of the sports car, casually threw the electronic car key to the hotel security guard who approached her eagerly, carried her bag, and walked all the way inside without looking at the person who got out of the other car. Even though Qin Xiu was helping the old lady get out of the car and might need a hand, Feng Mingzhu had no intention of turning back to help. She even wanted to get rid of them and go in alone. Fortunately, there was a security guard who came up to help. The old lady's legs were not as agile as when they met last time. After getting out of the car, she took a few breaths, said something to Mrs. Feng, and then walked up the stairs. "What are you looking at?" Xiao Fei looked back and saw Feng Ling standing there with no intention of leaving, so he looked in the direction she was looking at. When he saw Madame Feng, Xiao Fei was puzzled and then looked at the others around him. The head of the Feng family, Grandfather Feng and Grandmother Feng, rarely show their faces in front of others. They rarely attend these banquets. Usually Mr. Feng, Madame Feng and Feng Mingzhu will appear at these banquets. Occasionally Madame Feng's mother will come to take a look and come out to relax. If I remember correctly, these two are Madame Feng and her mother. Feng Ling didn't speak. Of course she knew them. After all, she had helped catch the gangsters and sat at the same table to eat. She still couldn't forget the way this old lady looked at her. "Let's go." Feng Ling withdrew her gaze. Qin Xiu helped the old lady up the stairs and said as she walked, "Mom, the weather in Los Angeles is getting colder and colder recently. If your legs are really uncomfortable, if you don't want to come out for a walk, you can rest at home. In the future, let Mingzhu come out to participate in these activities alone. She is not a child now. We don't need to accompany her all the time in this kind of party." Madame Dowager said as she walked, "It's not comfortable to be cooped up at home. I'm getting old, so I'll go out and walk more when I can. If one day I can't walk anymore, I'll be dead. That way, I won't have to be taken care of in bed." When they walked into the banquet hall, Feng Ling and Xiao Fei happened to pass by another person. The moment they passed by, Qin Xiu lowered her head to help the old lady tidy up her clothes, so she didn't see them. At this time, Feng Mingzhu was already in front, drinking a glass of champagne with several familiar ladies. When she looked back, she found that Qin Xiu and her grandmother hadn't come in yet. She immediately looked back impatiently. When she saw the two of them come in slowly, she immediately put down the empty wine glass in her hand and said, "Mom, let Grandma rest at home next time. This kind of occasion is not suitable for her." Madame Dowager knew that Feng Zhuzhu disliked her because her legs were not nimble, so she didn't say much. She had spoiled her granddaughter since she was a child, so she had long been used to it. She patted Qin Xiu's hand and told her not to get angry at the child here. Chapter 980. But Feng Mingzhu didn't think so. She had been holding a grudge all this time. In particular, everyone in the Feng family agreed to let Li Nanheng marry a cenotaph. Even her grandmother, who had always doted on her, didn't continue to oppose this matter. She felt that she had lost face and was completely isolated and helpless at home. She had nowhere to vent her anger, but there was no other way. However, from her attitude, it was obvious that she was angry. The nature of this banquet was very simple. It was just a gathering of the famous families in Los Angeles. Occasionally, some businessmen would stand together in groups to talk about some business and contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Most of the time, the socialites would stand together to gossip about which young lady had been dumped by whom, and which young lady had been cheated on by whom. Feng Ling followed Xiao Fei in the crowd. From time to time, when they met some acquaintances of the Qiao family, Feng Ling nodded and greeted them cooperatively, and then followed Xiao Fei all the way. However, because of Feng Ling, Father Qiao and Mother Qiao didn't specially arrange for any socialites to meet Xiao Fei. Xiao Fei looked as if he hadn't slept well last night. Now, holding Feng Ling's hand and walking in the crowd, he looked energetic. On the other side, Qin Xiu helped the old lady to sit down on a leather sofa next to the banquet hall. There were also several old ladies of other big families sitting next to her, who were about 70 or 80 years old. They were all a group of old ladies who couldn't walk very well but were unwilling to be left behind by these young people. Although they were all old, they were still wearing famous brands. Occasionally, two of them could stand up and walk a few steps with crutches in their hands. These old ladies sat together and had endless topics to talk about, such as what kind of wood the crutches were made of, what coats were custom-made by their children, and the changes in their family's business in the past few decades. Women were women. Even if they were old, they still had all kinds of psychology of comparison. As they chatted, more and more topics came up. Qin Xiu's mother was not in a good state, but she chatted with these old guys. When Qin Xiu came over, she happened to see that the old lady got up and sat down on the sofa on the other side, leaving the old lady's bag on this sofa. The old madam was afraid that the round jade would be lost, so a few days ago she specially asked a craftsman to custom make a very sturdy jade necklace to string the round jade together and hung it on the zipper of her purse. Looking at the round jade, she recalled that old mistress often sighed at this thing. If she remembered correctly, her grandmother once said that this round jade should be attached to the jade pendant that her fated younger sister wore. Looking at the jade, Feng Mingzhu's eyes grew colder and colder. A person who had been dead for so many years, what right did he have to occupy the hearts of everyone in the family? He had only existed in this world for a year, and he was still an ignorant one-year-old child. Did he have to be remembered by everyone for the rest of his life? She suddenly reached out and directly pulled the round jade and the jade essence chain off. She turned around and saw that her grandmother and the other old ladies were chatting excitedly and did not notice her. She clenched the round jade tightly in her hand, threw it into her bag and turned around to leave. "I'm going to the bathroom. You guys talk first." When passing by the group of socialites, Feng Mingzhu said lightly and turned to go to the bathroom. In the bathroom, Feng Ling had just walked into the small door inside when she seemed to hear the sound of high heels approaching from outside. She didn't pay much attention to it. She just felt that the person outside didn't seem to have any intention of going to the bathroom after walking in, nor did she hear the rustling sound when she washed her hands and touched up her makeup. Based on her usual habit of being careful, Feng Ling gave up the intention of going to the bathroom. She stood by the toilet for a while, then gently pushed the door open a crack and looked outside. She saw that Feng Mingzhu took out a round jade strung with jade essence from her bag and held it in her hand. She stood there and looked at the thing in her hand, clenching her fingers tightly as if she was considering something and hesitating. After 2 or 3 minutes, Feng Mingzhu suddenly threw the thing in her hand into the trash can by the side, washed her hands and turned to leave. Such a scene was nothing in Feng Ling's eyes, but no matter how rich the Feng family was, the round jade and the jade essence that looked expensive would be thrown away just like that. And she seemed to be very hesitant before throwing them away. There was obviously something wrong. Although Feng Ling didn't care much about the Feng family and Feng Mingzhu, she felt that something was wrong. She didn't know where her curiosity came from, but she instinctively walked to the trash can and saw that the thing fell on a clean plastic bag inside. She reached out and picked it up. The round jade felt hard and cold in her hand, which was very similar to the jade pendant she had been wearing when she was a child. She touched the outline of this round jade and saw that there seemed to be an exquisitely designed ring in the middle of the jade, but it seemed that a piece of jade could be inlaid in it. The size of the gap in the middle of this round jade? Feng Ling paused and suddenly raised her hand to touch her neck, only to remember that she hadn't worn that piece of jade for a long time. It had been placed in the suitcase under the bed at 11 base. But although she didn't wear it on her body, she felt that her jade pendant seemed to fit in it. The size seemed to be just right, but after all, there would be some errors in the size measured by her eyes, so she couldn't be sure if it was just right. If it was just right, what did it mean? Would the word Feng on the jade pendant have anything to do with the Feng family? Just as Feng Ling was wondering, suddenly, there was a series of women's screams and men's roars outside. Her eyes darkened. Years of training made her realize that something must have happened from those people's screams. She held the jade ring in her hand and suddenly walked out quickly. The bathroom was on the second floor of the banquet hall. As she walked out, she heard someone shouting, "Run, run! Some gangsters have sneaked in and kidnapped the miss of the Feng family. Those people all have guns in their hands. They are all a group of people. Run, or you won't be able to run out later. Go to the back door." Hearing these words, Feng Ling was expressionless. Those people were all running to the back door of the balcony on the second floor behind her, but she didn't hesitate to go in the opposite direction. When she reached a dimly lit railing on the second floor, she lowered her head and saw the chaotic scene below. She saw that Feng Mingzhu, who had just returned from the bathroom, was held in the middle by 2 men in black suits with guns raised to her head. Feng Mingzhu was so scared that her face turned pale and she looked around with trembling eyes, begging someone to save her. Chapter 981. Mrs. Feng and the old lady were scared out of their wits, and the others were retreating in fear. Although the two of them were scared, after all, it was Feng Mingzhu who was kidnapped. They could only keep saying to those people, Don't hurt her. Our Feng family has never offended anyone from the underworld. We only have one daughter. Don't hurt her." However, those people acted as if they didn't hear him at all. They just held their guns and forced everyone around them to step back. They said loudly in English that was not very proficient. "Mr. Bob, hurry up and hand over what I want. Today I'll let your hotel and the grand banquet held by the United States Legal News to completely ruin your reputation." Many people on the first floor were so scared that they kept retreating. They had no idea what was going on. Feng Ling, who was standing on the second floor, noticed that the man who had just spoken raised his head slightly as though he was looking for someone. From their tone, it seemed that these gangsters had a grudge with the owner of the hotel, or there was some other reason. In short, the guests present today were just cannon fodder. If something really happened, it would at most be similar to the revenge of terrorists. If someone really died and something happened, even if the police arrived, they might not be able to easily suppress it. Some of the more courageous men were quietly protecting their family members as they moved back. However, what they didn't expect was that the group of gangsters wasn't just a few people. When those people moved back, 17 or 18 people wearing almost the same clothes suddenly rushed out from the corner. They seemed to be wearing the same security uniform. So all the security guards on the first floor of this hotel were planted by gangsters. This is a planned act of revenge and terrorism. Feng Ling placed her hand gently on the railing and stood in the dark corner where no one could easily detect her. She looked down indifferently. Suddenly her phone vibrated in her pocket. She took it out and saw that it was a message from Xiao Fei. They had guns. She had been separated from Xiao Fei when she went to the restroom just now. The fact that he would ask this meant that he really understood her temper very well. The current situation was that even though both of them were expert snipers in 11 base, they didn't have guns in their hands, while those people had guns and knives in their hands and came prepared. It wasn't easy to save people or to escape from here. Xiao Fei was traveling with his family, and there were many people here who were familiar with the Qiao family. It was impossible for him to go alone. However, when Feng Ling looked down from above, she did not see Xiao Fei's figure. She guessed that he was probably observing the current situation from a corner like her. "Don't move." Just when a young man who seemed to be slightly behind couldn't stand it anymore and was about to step forward to rescue Feng Mingzhu, someone suddenly jumped out from behind and aimed a gun at the back of his head. At the same time he pulled the trigger. Then suddenly someone fired a shot upwards and screams rang out again. Everyone present was so scared that they didn't even dare to move back. They could only shrink into the crowd and tremble. Originally, he was still wondering why the hotel's security guards suddenly disappeared, but he didn't expect the security guards to be such dangerous people. This hotel was also a very famous star-rated hotel in Los Angeles. For such a thing to happen, it could be seen that the owner of this hotel must have had a lot of dealings with various Taoists. He must have caused some trouble or found out some secret, which was why he was in such a big trouble now. Seeing that Feng Mingzhu was being held hostage, Mrs. Feng Qinxiu had been trying to go there, but was still forcibly pulled back by the people behind her. The old lady also wanted to go there, but the people behind her pressed her shoulders so that she couldn't move at all. She could only look at Feng Mingzhu anxiously. "Mingzhu, don't be afraid. Grandma is here. Grandma is here." Although Feng Mingzhu didn't cry, her eyes were already obviously red, and the fear in her eyes was overflowing. She wanted to take a look at the people who held her hostage in a panic, but the people behind her pulled her hair hard and forced her to look forward. "Don't move." Feng Mingzhu's face instantly turned pale because of the pain on her scalp. Feeling the ruthlessness of these people, her eyes were even more frightened. "Help me." She looked in the direction of the crowd in panic, looking at those men who at least looked tall, begging someone to have the ability to rescue her from these terrible people, and kept mouthing, "Help me, help me." She is asking for help. Suddenly, a security guard in black suddenly came out from the side, blocking Feng Mingzhu's sight. At the same time, the man who was holding Feng Mingzhu behind her suddenly hit her head with the butt of the gun in his hand. "If you don't behave, I'll shoot you now." "Ah." Feng Mingzhu instantly stiffened in pain, and the place where she was hit by the gun immediately bled, and a few traces of blood slowly flowed along her hair to her forehead. Seeing the blood on Feng Mingzhu's head, the old lady who was standing not far away and being held down by someone was so scared that her legs softened and she fell to the ground. "Mom?" Qin Xiu immediately turned to look at the old lady worriedly and reached out to help her up, but she was still forcibly pulled back by someone, and she staggered and almost fell down. Seeing this scene, Feng Ling put her hand into her pocket. She touched the round jade bracelet she had just picked up in the bathroom. Whether she had anything to do with the Feng family in Los Angeles or not, whether it was just a coincidence or her guess, at least she had met the old lady and Mrs. Feng once, and at least she could be sure that they were very friendly to her. Even if Feng Mingzhu was spoiled, The Feng family shouldn't die here because of a dispute between a hotel owner and the underworld. She stood in place and slowly retreated to the darkest place in a corner, where no one could see any of her movements. Recently, Feng Ling had been living in Li Nanheng's apartment. Her safety index was too high, so she didn't carry a gun with her. However, since she was a child, she habitually carried a dagger with her. Before going out, she habitually placed the dagger in the weapon bag on her waist. It was a very small bag about the size of 2 keys, and inside it was a very sharp folding knife. The moment she held the knife in her hand, Feng Ling stared at the man standing behind Feng Mingzhu. That man should be the leader of these people, either their boss or one of the masterminds of this revenge operation. Chapter 982. Feng Ling took another step back. While the group of people were focused on Feng Mingzhu, who was crying out in pain, Feng Ling, who was originally standing in the dark, suddenly pressed against the railing and leaped up. She directly jumped down from the 2nd floor. This kind of height of less than 3 meters was not a problem for people who had been trained for a long time in 11 base. The moment she landed, Feng Ling raised her long leg and kicked the person closest to her. Then he tilted the knife in his hand forward and pressed it against the throat of a gunman before he could react. The gunman's voice was instantly suppressed back into his throat. He looked at the person who suddenly appeared out of nowhere in disbelief, but the cold blade on his throat made him afraid to move again. Feng Ling had no intention of killing him. Under the other party's incredulous gaze, she suddenly raised her other hand and gave the other party's neck a hard slap. The moment the other party was knocked unconscious, she retracted the knife and swiftly snatched the gun from the other party's hand. She turned it around in her hand and determined the weight of the gun, the number of bullets in it, and the model of the gun in 2 or 3 seconds. The person who had just approached saw the situation and was about to raise his gun at her. Unexpectedly, Feng Ling, who was dressed like a sporty girl, suddenly threw the folding knife in her hand. It spun in the air and slashed across the man's neck. As the man cried out, a string of blood spurted from his throat and he fell to the ground. When Feng Ling jumped down, there were very few people in this position. Right now she had only killed 2 people. The people in front had been retreating in fear and had not noticed the situation here. She took back the dagger that was already stained with blood. She looked at the man who was twitching and bleeding on the ground because his throat had been slit. She stepped forward and took the gun from him. She casually put it into her pocket in case she needed it. "Please let go of my Mingzhu." The old lady sat on the ground, feeling a little dizzy. She was still begging. When the person behind her was about to pull her up, she turned around and hugged the leg of the security guard, begging, "If you want to hit someone, hit me. Don't hurt my granddaughter. I can't lose another one. Get lost, you old fart." That person kicked the old woman to the ground. "Mom!" Qin Xiu exclaimed. "Grandma." Feng Mingzhu was in so much pain that her tears had already fallen. She turned to look at the old lady on the ground, and her eyes were filled with grievance. "Grandma." Seeing this scene from outside the crowd, Feng Ling raised her eyes. "Big brother, some of these people are dishonest. They should have already called the police," someone suddenly said in a low voice. "What's there to be afraid of? If the Los Angeles police dared to interfere, we would still be able to appear here." Just as the person standing behind Feng Mingzhu was about to speak, before he could blink, he suddenly heard a gust of wind by his ear. One of the men behind him was suddenly kicked away, and the stick in his hand was snatched away. Just as the man reacted nimbly and dodged to the side, thinking that he would be able to avoid the stick attack, he didn't expect to suddenly hear a bang. He was shot in the shoulder. Before Feng Mingzhu realized what was going on, the hand that imprisoned her instantly loosened, and at the same time she smelled a disgusting smell of blood. She staggered and fell to the ground. She looked back, only to see that the person who had just abducted her was holding his shoulder with a painful expression, and then he turned back and said angrily, "Bastard! Where did this bastard come from? Kill her for me." Only then did Feng Mingzhu turn her eyes, only to see a figure in women's sportswear passing through the crowd. Before she could see clearly who it was, her hair was pulled up again by the 2 men next to her. Her scalp was in pain, and she bit her lips hard and did not dare to make a sound, but her eyes were fixed on the figure in the crowd, not knowing what had happened. Feng Ling's speed was very fast. She accurately found the security guards in the crowd, and with every step she took, she accurately slashed the knife in her hand 3 inches behind those people's waists. In just an instant, those people were paralyzed by the strong recoil on their backs for a long time. When they came to their senses, their backs were already covered in blood, and the clothes on their backs were all wet. The people around who had a look of horror were all dumbfounded. They did not expect that such a powerful person would suddenly appear, and from the looks of it, it was a young girl. They could not see her face clearly, but they could see her figure moving through the crowd. She was as swift and decisive as a leopard, and her movements were extremely beautiful. When someone behind her was about to catch up to her, Feng Ling casually pulled up the zipper of her sportswear, turned to the side and gave another handsome kick. Not only did she not give these people the slightest chance to retaliate, but she also did not seem the least bit tired. No one knew that this short-haired girl dressed in light-colored sportswear was a member of the sniper team that walked out of 11 base, and no one knew of her past. However, the girl's figure and speed were shocking. A person who could safely move through dangerous minefields in the face of terrorists as if it was flat ground, in front of this group of half-baked gangsters, dealing with them was just a piece of cake. But right now the most important thing was to divert their attention, lest they really hurt the innocent guests here. The old lady who was sitting on the ground saw that the situation was somewhat chaotic. Qin Xiu also took the opportunity to help the old lady up. The two of them wanted to go to the front to pull Feng Mingzhu over, but the moment they approached they were glared at by those people. Only then did they realize that although they had diverted many people's attention, Feng Mingzhu was still in their hands. If the two of them dared to go forward, the two guns stuck to Feng Mingzhu's head were likely to really pierce through her head. What should we do? The old lady cried anxiously. At the same time, a figure suddenly leaped out from behind Feng Mingzhu, pulled the heads of the two people behind her toward the center, and slammed into them harshly. When the two people were slightly dazed from the impact, the figure snatched the guns and shot through their wrists. At the same time she stretched out her long arm and pushed Feng Mingzhu, who was standing stiffly in place, forward out of the danger zone. Feng Mingzhu staggered forward and fell in front of the old lady. The old lady was filled with disbelief and excitement, and rushed to hug Feng Mingzhu, who was crying in hindsight. "Mingzhu, are you all right? Your head is bleeding. It hurts so much." Feng Mingzhu cried in the old lady's arms. "Grandma, I thought you didn't love me anymore. How could that be? You and second brother are Grandma's most beloved children. It's good that you're all right. It's good that you're all right." Chapter 983. On one side was a peaceful life for the grandmother and grandchildren, while on the other side was an abyss of suffering. All of a sudden she noticed Xiao Fei, who had just rescued Feng Mingzhu, and was about to toss the gun in her pocket to him when she saw that he had already snatched the gun. She did not move, nor did she have any intention of handing it over to him. The two of them shuttled through the crowd with tacit understanding. There were already a few people on the scene who were about to die from having their necks slit. Those people fled in all directions from time to time because of the chaos. Those who were quick had already run out to call the police. Even if the police couldn't deal with these gangsters in this situation, most of the people present today were famous people in Los Angeles. They had to deal with them even if they didn't want to. Otherwise, if these people went to find trouble with the police later, it would be even more troublesome. Even if it was just a formality, the police had to be there. They couldn't afford to have too many casualties on such an occasion. Otherwise it would definitely be big news. This wouldn't benefit either party, especially since her and Xiao Fei's identities in 11 Base would be discovered. 11 Base had just experienced a crisis because of her. She couldn't rashly allow 11 Base to stand in the eye of the storm again. She leaped up onto the table where the wine tower was supposed to be placed. Using the height of the table, she continued to jump up to the second floor. While everyone was still wondering who the girl was, the police had already rushed in. Xiao Fei's reaction was the fastest. When the group of people's attention was focused on the railing on the second floor, he reached out and grabbed the leader of the group. With a kick he pushed him to the ground. This was the scene that the police saw when they rushed in. It was already a mess down there. Father Qiao and Mother Qiao looked in the direction of the second floor with slight confusion. They weren't surprised that their son was born in 11 Base and that Xiao Fei was skilled. However, although the girl didn't show her face, her speed was so fast that no one could see her clearly. But if they remembered correctly, the tracksuit. Xiao Fei's girlfriend? What kind of situation is this? How can there be such a powerful girl? At the corner of the second floor, Feng Ling quickly hid in an empty room. After withdrawing her hands, she lowered her head to see that her sleeves were dirty and stained with blood. But she was wearing thin clothes inside, so she couldn't take off her coat. Looking at the dirty blood on her sleeves, she was not very satisfied with her current speed. Sure enough, he felt a slight numbness in his arm when he made his move. His movements were also delayed for a second. Otherwise, he could have been faster and wouldn't have been splashed with blood. Seeing that the guests on the first floor would be fine for the time being because of the intervention of the police, Feng Ling, who had always been too lazy to care about these things, leaned against the door of the small room. After watching silently for a while, she rolled up the blood on her sleeves, hid the blood, turned to the balcony on the second floor and left through the back door. Before she left, she sent a message to Qiao Fei and left first. In such a situation, Qiao Fei definitely wouldn't allow her to show herself. After all, the incident in the military base had attracted a lot of attention. If the fact that she was a woman was exposed, this matter would really blow up. She did not want to reveal herself. Naturally, Qiao Fei would not allow her to step forward rashly. It was best for her to leave like this. After taking a taxi, Feng Ling sat in the car, glanced at the time and put her cell phone into her pocket. Her fingers once again touched the cold round jade bracelet. She took it out and held it in her hand for a long while. After returning to the apartment, she stopped the car and heard the sound of a text message. She picked it up and saw Qiao Fei's reply, "Go back in peace. As long as I'm here, they won't be able to stir up any trouble. Thank you for today." After reading it, Feng Ling put her cell phone back into her pocket and went straight to the door of the apartment. As soon as she entered, she was suddenly shocked by the sound of a car speeding past behind her. She instinctively looked back, only to see that Li Nanheng's car was only half a meter away from her. The wind brought by the car lifted the hem of her sweatshirt. Then, the tall black Hummer quickly stopped in the parking lot of the park not far from her. The man got out of the car, slammed the door and walked up to her expressionlessly. Seeing the man's expression, Feng Ling had a hunch that he seemed to know something. "You should be in the base. Why did he suddenly come back to the apartment?" "Boss." Facing the approaching man, Feng Ling subconsciously stood upright in front of him. Li Nanheng's expression didn't change. He coldly looked at her from head to toe. "Where did you go?" "I was bored staying alone, so I went out for a walk." "Just for a walk? And?" Looking at her calm and composed eyes, Li Nanheng's cold brows moved. "Is boring to stay at home alone? My schedule in the base has been very tight for so many years. I'm not used to the sudden slowing down of life, but I'll try my best to adapt. Boss, if you have something to do, you don't have to come back to accompany me." "I do have something to do. I'm expected to come back tomorrow at the earliest." The man lowered his eyes to look at her indifferently. His eyes shifted to the spot of blood on the fair skin below her ear. He reached out and touched it. Sure enough, it was a drop of dried blood. He rubbed it away. The man calmly took his hand back. "I went out for a walk. It was very peaceful. Nothing happened?" "And?" Li Nanheng coldly smiled. "Little girl, have you learned to lie?" Feng Ling, seeing that she couldn't hide it anymore, she thought for a while and said, "I'm sorry, Boss Li. I just went out to help a friend. I saw someone being kidnapped, so I helped. But I don't think anyone will recognize that I'm from 11 Base. I'm not wearing 11 Base's uniform. I won't cause trouble for the base." "When did I say you would cause trouble?" She didn't know why this man came back angrily. It was as if he had eaten dynamite. Feng Ling didn't know what to say and just looked at him strangely. Li Nanheng coldly raised his eyebrows, picked up his phone, opened a communication app and enlarged a photo in it. The Chinese community in Los Angeles had a gathering today. Young Master Qiao took his girlfriend to meet his parents. This kind of photo is common in the Chinese community and can be published in the newspaper within an hour. "You told me you just went to help a friend?" As soon as Feng Ling saw the photo, the corner of her mouth twitched. Why didn't she notice that there were reporters around? Chapter 984. At that time, when Qiao Fei introduced her as his girlfriend, were there reporters standing next to her? And someone even took photos? Then she looked up at Li Nanheng's expression as if he had eaten dynamite. No wonder this man suddenly rushed back with a murderous look. Deputy Drill Master Qiao was very kind to me in the base. I was also surprised to see him today. He said that his parents forced him to go on a blind date and asked me to pretend to be his girlfriend and accompany him to a dinner party. You can see that I didn't even change my clothes. You can see that I really went to help him at the last minute. I didn't even prepare, she explained sincerely. Hearing this, Li Nanheng immediately sneered. Pretend to be his girlfriend? No woman in the world will believe this trick. Only a girl who grew up in the jungle will believe it. Feng Ling, I also treated you well in the base. Why did you get angry when I kissed you? He asked you to pretend to be his girlfriend, but you really went to the party with him? Boss, I can only help you this once. With that, Feng Ling suddenly coughed and didn't want to continue this topic. Boss, I'm still not feeling well. I'm a little tired. I'll go back to rest first. If you are busy you can go back to the base first. Then she turned to leave. Stop. Feng Ling was about to leave but hearing the man's unfriendly tone, she had to stop and silently turn to look at him. Boss. Li Nanheng was much taller than her. He looked down at her calm expression and stepped forward. When Feng Ling didn't understand what he wanted to do, her wrist suddenly tightened. The man directly pulled her wrist up, and the blood that had been hidden in the cuffs for a long time appeared in front of the man in an instant. Feng Ling, what is this? Li Nanheng looked at her coldly. Seeing that she couldn't hide it anymore, Feng Ling tried to pull her arm out of his hand, but the man held it tightly and looked at her coldly. You went to a party, pretended to be someone's girlfriend and came back with blood? There was a group of gangsters causing trouble at the banquet. I saw them holding Feng Mingzhu hostage. Although I don't really like her, she's innocent, so I helped her. This blood is also someone else's. I didn't suffer any injuries. As Feng Ling spoke, she tried to pull her hand out, but after struggling for a long time, she was still unable to do so. She immediately stopped moving and looked at him. Boss, let go. However, just as she was about to frown in displeasure, she suddenly felt a piercing pain on her chin. She did not even notice a small wound that she did not know how she had injured herself. It was hidden under her chin, where it was not easy to notice when they were facing each other. The man's fingers brushed past her wound, causing her expression to freeze in pain. Only then did she realize that she was also injured. Although it was very slight, it was only such a small piece. Don't let yourself get hurt again. The man saw that she was in pain and put down his hand. Go back and apply some simple medicine to disinfect it. The man's voice rang. At the same time he did not say anything more. He directly held her wrist and brought her back to the direction of the apartment. Feng Ling followed him silently. She raised her eyes to look at the man's tall and broad back and pursed her lips. In fact, when she was at the banquet earlier, an image suddenly appeared in her mind. If she did not successfully escape at the scene, would Li Nanheng suddenly appear like in the past every time she could not solve the situation, just like in the movies, stepping on colorful auspicious clouds and descending, although it was only an image that flashed through her mind, and although she had successfully escaped at the scene, she was really a little flustered to be intercepted by him the moment she returned. She found that she seemed to be a little unable to control her heart. A child who did not even know who she was raised by a wolf, who did not even know what a woman was, could she really fall in love normally like other girls? He had also said that wolves were born to be loyal. She was also loyal. If she really set her mind on him, then she really could not do without him. However, she did not know much about Li Nanheng's identity and many things outside the base. She did not dare to approach him, nor was she sure if she should. But she did not want to be so spoiled. Because she really found that she seemed to like him. Very much. She was brought all the way back to the apartment by Li Nanheng. After closing the door, the man coldly asked her to sit on the sofa and not move. Feng Ling obediently sat there without moving until the man came over with medical cotton swabs and disinfectant. He looked at her coldly and then bent down to treat the wound on her chin. When the disinfectant fell on her skin, the pain was a little unbearable. She did not move and just quietly watched him. Li Nanheng helped her apply the medicine. His cold, dark eyes glanced at her and met her eyes that had been staring at him. The man's cold brows moved slightly. He suddenly scolded with a cold expression, "What are you looking at? Are you moved?" Feng Ling. She instantly looked away and turned to get up from the sofa. "My clothes are dirty and stained with dirty blood. I'll go change." The man did not force her. Recently there were a lot of things in the base in the Li family. Although he was in the mood to tease her, now was not the most appropriate time. He put away the used medical cotton swabs in his hand and put them in the wastebasket by the side. The next day, Li Nanheng said that he had something to do and went back to the Li family. He was not sure if he could come back tonight, so he told her to stay at home and not to run around. The so-called run around was obvious. Feng Ling was too lazy to talk to him. This man had become more and more domineering in recent days. She was just living in his apartment, not his possession. Couldn't she even decide who to meet? Besides, the relationship between her and Xiao Fei was pure. She was very calm and had never thought too much about it. Before going out, Li Nanheng continued to give her repeated orders. Not to mention Xiao Fei, even if Kay and the others came out of the base to look for her, she was not allowed to meet them, especially at night. He asked her to be careful. Her arms would occasionally be numb. If she couldn't even hold a knife steadily, she would not even have the ability to protect herself. She should not try to help her at the banquet again. Feng Ling did not agree. She just told him to hurry back to the Li family, in case the elders became impatient and came over to beat him with their crutches. Hearing this, Li Nanheng suddenly smiled, stretched out his hand and pulled Feng Ling over. He kissed her on the cheek. Feng Ling was stunned by the kiss and then he whispered in her ear, "Be good and wait for me to come back, okay?" Chapter 985. After kissing her, the man let go of her shoulders and left. Feng Ling stood in front of the door in a daze for a long while, her face burning. She stared at the closed door and stood in front of the door for a long time before returning to her senses. They had only stayed here for a few days, but for some reason she felt as though they were an old married couple. She was actually hoping that he would come back earlier. The Li family. The old men sat together in a circle. Nanheng hasn't returned yet? He'll be back today. The matter with the Feng family should be put on the agenda. Previously, when the military was in trouble, fortunately the Feng family stepped in, so the military didn't dare to be too arrogant. I think the marriage between the two families should be held sooner or later. Didn't Nanheng say that he could marry the Feng family's second son after he turns 18? Now that he's already past 18, if he refuses to marry Feng Mingzhu and insists on taking this path, then even if he has to kneel, he must bring back her cenotaph. We can't go back on our words. Besides, this time the Feng family has also helped us greatly. We also owe them a favor. We can't keep dragging this matter. Have you discussed it with Grandfather Feng and Grandmother Feng? After we bring back the cenotaph, directly send it to the Li family's ancestral hall and guard it for 3 years. After 3 years there will be no more relations between them. At that time, Nanheng can talk about marriage at will. Otherwise we can't just end the Li family's bloodline just like that, right? He should at least marry a normal wife. I've discussed it and the Feng family has agreed. They just want to find a home for that poor child. Since Nanheng suggested this, he must do it. If he wants to guard it for 3 years, then so be it. After 3 years he can marry any wife he wants, but in these 3 years he must be the Feng family's grandson-in-law in name. Also, the matter of the Minghun cannot be leaked. He must announce to the public that he is married. He can't tell anyone, nor can he explain the reason. For the sake of that poor child who has passed away for many years, and to preserve his dignity and purity, I don't think this request is too much. Indeed, and this time the Feng family has also helped 11 Base greatly with the commander's death. Nanheng has no reason to refuse and neither do we. Let's do it this way. Let's wait for Nanheng to come back. As the sky gradually darkened, Feng Ling cooked a bowl of noodles alone in the kitchen. In the past few days her cooking skills had improved a lot. Previously she had to cook it until it was almost soft before she was sure it was cooked. Later she had to pick one out to taste it. Now in fact she had cooked it a few times when Li Nanheng was not around. She could already feel if it was cooked with chopsticks. She added some of the seasonings she bought from the convenience store. Tasted pretty good. Then she took the bowl to the living room and sat down. She turned on the TV and ate. At about 7 o'clock, Feng Ling washed the dishes and took the initiative to pick up the mop to clean the room and the floor. Although there would be an auntie who would come to clean the room every few days, she would clean it out of habit when she lived here. Her phone suddenly rang on the sofa. She walked over to pick it up and saw that it was a call from Qiao Fei. She hesitated for a moment before picking it up. "Brother Qiao? Come out and have a seat?" Qiao Fei's voice was still low and hoarse. From the sound of it, there seemed to be the sound of a car. Feng Ling glanced at the time. "Didn't I say that after leaving 11 Base, we shouldn't meet again? I've already helped you once. Brother Qiao, I remember that you are a person who knows what to do." After a moment of silence, he said, "I'm downstairs in your apartment." Feng Ling was surprised. She turned to walk to the floor-to-ceiling window, opened it and walked out. She looked down and saw that there were many cars in the parking lot. The distance between the 10 floors was not high or low, but she could clearly see the headlights of a Bentley flashing in the parking lot. After seeing that car, she said to the phone, "You should go back. You shouldn't see me for business or private reasons. Brother Qiao, don't tell me you drank too much again." "And you guessed right. I just drank some wine. There are some in the car. Do you want to come down and drink with me? You know my alcohol tolerance is not good. Even if you want to find someone to accompany you, you shouldn't look for me. I only want to look for you." Feng Ling was speechless. "I'm hanging up." "Feng Ling, I drank too much and can't drive back. Can you send me back again?" Feng Ling pursed her lips. "Do you think I'll fall for it again?" Qiao Fei chuckled lightly. "Have you become smarter?" Li Nanheng said that he was very scheming. Now she realized that Qiao Fei was indeed very scheming. He really had the cheek to use those vulgar methods to woo girls on her. Was he bullying her because she didn't know anything? If you can't drive, I'll call for a designated driver for you. I just want to look for you to drink. I don't want a designated driver. From his tone, it seemed that he was really a little drunk. Had the matter at the banquet not been resolved yet? Was he still trying to force her to marry him? Or was there something else? Feng Ling did not ask much. Besides, since the police had intervened that day, it was just a dozen or so gangsters. It was not a big problem, so there was no need for her to continue asking about the follow-up. Furthermore, with Xiao Fei around, it must have been resolved. Thus, there was nothing for her to ask. I'm going to sleep. Brother Xiao, drive back by yourself. Be careful. With that, she hung up the phone and turned it off. She turned back to the window and threw the phone onto the sofa. After an hour of exercise and shower, it was already past 9 o'clock at night when she was ready to sleep. Feng Ling returned to the bedroom and was about to draw the curtains. The window on this side happened to be facing the same direction as the balcony. She lowered her head and saw that the car on the parking lot had not left. However, the headlights of the car did not continue to flash. It was parked there quietly. Feng Ling silently glanced at it for a while and directly drew the curtains. After lying down, she was too lazy to pick up the phone on the sofa that had been turned off. She only stared at the chandelier above for a long time. After thinking for a while, she got up and opened the curtains to look down. The car was still parked there. She had only urged him to go back over the phone. She had already made it very clear, but he still refused to listen? Last time, they had clearly agreed that they would not see each other again and that they would only help once. The people of 11 Base had always said what they wanted and would never go back on their words. What was he doing? Feng Ling got up, put on her clothes, picked up her coat and walked out. After going downstairs, she walked to the parking lot and directly walked to the side of the Bentley. There was no light in the vicinity. The street lights and park decorations in the apartment complex were a little far from here. It was pitch black. She walked up and knocked on the window of the driver's seat. Chapter 986. The car window rolled down and Xiao Fei glanced at her. Get in the car. Seeing the drunkenness in his eyes, Feng Ling immediately frowned. Do you like to come here to look for me when you drink too much? I was driving by and knew you were here, so I couldn't restrain myself. I just wanted to see you and leave when the light in your room went out. So? Why did you still call me? Maybe I drank too much and was not sober enough. Xiao Fei smiled self-deprecatingly. Are you sure you want to talk to me like this? I have wine in my car. Let's drink 2 bottles? I don't want to drink. Feng Ling's expression showed no sign of compromise. Go back. I shouldn't have come down. Seeing that you haven't left, I came down to see you. Brother Xiao, you know my character very well. There's really no need to pay so much attention to me. Xiao Fei was silent for a moment and suddenly smiled. It seems that you know everything. Feng Ling did not speak. She didn't know and didn't understand before. But now she should have seen it. Although she shouldn't have come downstairs to meet him, he was here after all and he came because of her, so she should come over to take a look. She always had a very clear balance in her heart. She knew what she should do and what she shouldn't do. It doesn't matter. I've never hidden my feelings. Previously in the base you didn't want your identity to be discovered, so I didn't say much. In fact, from the beginning, I knew that there were many things between you and Li Nanheng that I couldn't interfere with. Although I tried, it seems that this is not something that can be achieved with hard work. Your heart has long been his, right? Xiao Fei leaned against the back of the driver's seat and looked at her sideways. You avoided me because you didn't want to be misunderstood by him. It seemed that he had seen through her thoughts. Feng Ling did not speak. Come up and sit for a while? Is it comfortable to be blown by the wind? I won't do anything to you. I'm drunk now. If you fight, I will definitely be beaten to the ground. What are you afraid of? Xiao Fei glanced at her with a smile. Feng Ling raised her eyebrows and looked at him. I don't have to get in your car. Let's have a chat. After all, we've known each other for so many years in the base. I'm the first person to discover your secret. This time, Feng Ling did not speak anymore. She hesitated for 2 seconds and got into the car. After sitting in the car, Xiao Fei directly handed her a bottle of wine from the back. Feng Ling took it but only placed it aside and did not open it to drink. He didn't force it. He just laughed self-deprecatingly, opened a bottle and drank it. Seeing him drink so quickly, Feng Ling was silent for a moment before saying, You seem to be very unhappy after leaving 11 Base. Feng Ling Feng Fei Ma. Fong 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 and Fong Fong and Ling Fong Fong. Fong Ling didn't have a home or parents, so she didn't understand the pressure outside the base. She wasn't good at commenting on things she didn't understand. Seeing that he was in a bad mood, she sat here silently to accompany him. Do you know what I like about you? Xiao Fei placed the bottle of wine down and turned to look at her with slightly tipsy eyes. I like your personality. You don't ask what you shouldn't ask. You don't talk too much and you don't explain too much. You're actually a very passionate person, but time and experience have slowly tempered you into a cold and aloof person. But only those who understand you know that you're actually not cold. You just have a sense of propriety in your heart and you've grasped it very well. Sometimes the charm of one's personality is really important. Regardless of whether you're a man or a woman, you'll still attract others. Fong Ling slightly curved her lips. Thank you for the compliment. Xiao Fei raised his eyebrows. Don't you have anything to say to me? Fong Ling was silent for a moment before saying, Brother Xiao, I don't know much about relationships. I know how you feel about me, but I'm very clear that I don't feel that way about you. Xiao Fei let out a long sigh and leaned against the back of the chair as if he had lost all his strength. He laughed at himself and said, And I know. So go back early. Fong Ling picked up the phone. You're not sober enough. I'll call a designated driver for you. Xiao Fei closed his eyes and did not stop her. After Fong Ling made an appointment with a designated driver and informed him of the location, she placed the phone down. She glanced at the bottle of wine that she did not drink and did not say anything more. She directly pushed the car door open and got out of the car. He watched as she left just like that. Although she came, she only rejected him and did not give him any chance at all. Xiao Fei thought that he could accept it, but he actually could not. Even though he had left 11 base and would not have many chances to see her again, he still felt indignant in his heart. Seeing that she was about to leave after getting out of the car, the man in the car abruptly pushed the car door open and rushed forward. He grabbed her wrist and turned her around angrily. When Fong Ling heard his voice, she subconsciously wanted to turn back. However, the moment she turned back, she almost fell into his arms. She staggered and hurriedly stepped back. However, Xiao Fei directly hugged her and pressed her tightly in his arms. He rested his chin on her neck and hugged her tightly. Fong Ling. Fong Ling's body instantly stiffened. She instinctively felt that her body was covered with barbs. She rushed to push him away, but Xiao Fei held her tightly. Fong Ling, can you consider me? I can give you everything you want. Freedom, happiness, everything. We've also been together in 11 base. In fact, I've been in contact with you longer than Boss Lee. I also know you well. Give me a chance. Consider me. Don't do this directly. Brother Xiao. Fong Ling furrowed her brows and pushed him hard. Let go of Xiao Fei. Fong Ling panicked. She abruptly pushed his lower abdomen harshly and raised her leg to push him away. However, Xiao Fei endured the pain and held her tightly again. Fong Ling, let go of me. Fong Ling, I don't want to let go. Let go. All of a sudden, a cold chill came from a certain direction. Before Fong Ling could push him away, she abruptly felt a chill on her back. She abruptly glanced to the side and saw that a tall, black Hummer had driven over. It stopped 5 meters away from her and Xiao Fei. The car window did not roll down. It simply stopped there. Fong Ling's expression stiffened. She rushed to push him away. Xiao Fei's body reeked of alcohol, indicating that he was currently irrational. Fong Ling harshly stepped on his feet. Let go of me. Just as she finished speaking, the sound of a car door being slammed 5 meters away sent chills down her spine. In the blink of an eye, she saw the tall and handsome man walking over. Chapter 987. Fong Ling could clearly sense the killing intent in the man's eyes, even though he recognized him as Xiao Fei. Xiao Fei, hurry and let go. Fong Ling hurriedly pushed him while secretly reminding him, hurry and let go. Fong Ling, I. However, before the drunk man could finish speaking, his back suddenly tightened. The man abruptly pulled him away from her. He was still slightly tipsy and hadn't raised his eyes to see the situation clearly when he received a heavy punch on his face. He staggered back several steps and leaned against the door of the Bentley. Only when Xiao Fei was knocked back against the car door did he wake up slightly. He abruptly raised his eyes and instantly met Li Nanheng's fiery eyes. Boss. When Fong Ling saw Li Nanheng's sudden punch, it was too late for her to stop him. Before he could turn around and punch Xiao Fei again, she rushed to stop him. However, Li Nanheng expressionlessly waved her hand away. Boss. Seeing that he was really angry, Feng Ling hurriedly reached out and hugged his arm. Boss, don't misunderstand. Brother Qiao drank too much. He didn't mean anything else. We're all members of 11 base. Don't beat your own people outside, boss. Out of the way, boss. Li Nanheng suddenly lowered his eyes and looked at her coldly. I told you to get out of the way. Feng Ling knew what he was angry about. Earlier, she didn't expect Qiao Fei to suddenly rush over to hug her, but she also didn't think it was right for them to fight here. Furthermore, it shouldn't be because of her. She held his arm tightly with both hands. Even through the clothes, she could feel the blood vessels and muscles on the man's arm because of the angry preparation to hit someone. She hugged him tightly. Stop hitting me. Seeing that she was trying to stop him, Li Nanheng's expression became even worse. He reached out to push her away, but Feng Ling suddenly turned around and stood in front of him. She opened her arms and took the initiative to hug his waist with great force. She could smell the faint smell of alcohol on Li Nanheng's body. Did these two men have an appointment today? One drank and the other came back with the smell of alcohol. One was in a bad mood and the other did not seem to be in a good mood either. She hugged his waist tightly. When the man stiffened because of this, she pressed her head against his chest and said, Li Nanheng, we're on the same side. Don't fight. If it weren't for Qiao Fei's presence, Li Nanheng might have been in a good mood when she took the initiative to give him a hug. But now, this little woman was forced into this state because of Qiao Fei. Ever since Li Nanheng returned to the Li family today, he had been under the pressure of the promise he had casually made and the shackles of moral kidnapping imposed by the Li family and the Feng family. He didn't want to affect her mood when she was resting because of his mood, but in the end, he couldn't help but want to come back to accompany her. Who the F***ck would have thought that the moment he came back, he would see his little woman, whom he did not even dare to kiss in order to calm her down, being forcefully held in the arms of this bastard Qiao Fei. Feng Ling, the man's voice was right above her head, ringing harshly, if you don't want anyone to die, get out of my way. Boss, calm down. You really just drank too much. There's nothing between me and him. Feng Ling hugged his waist, pressed her head against his chest and explained in a muffled voice, stop fighting. Qiao Fei leaned against the car door. Although Li Nanheng's punch was not particularly harsh, it was enough to make his mind muddled for a while. At this moment, he recovered from the muddled state and slowly steadied himself against the car door. Looking at the scene in front of him, he suddenly smiled and raised his hand to quickly wipe the corner of his mouth. When he lowered his head to see the trace of blood seeping out from the corner of his mouth, he immediately smiled again and raised his head to look in that direction, saying, Boss Li, this is not the way to snatch a woman. This is not 11 base, not the training ground. Do you want to use your fists to do the talking? You're really not F***king afraid of death. Li Nanheng was about to step forward, but the girl in his arms held onto him tightly, refusing to let him move. He lowered his head to look at the head in his arms and frowned. What are you doing? If I cripple him, will you still be able to become enemies with me? Let go of me. No. Boss, you can't be like this. This is all a misunderstanding. Do you think others can't see you fighting here? There are people coming and going here, and it's not like 11 base is a place where outsiders can't enter. Right now, the base is in a state of panic and a large part of the reason is because of me. Right now, if you and Qiao Fei fight because of me, then I should be the one who should scram. Feng Ling's long and muffled speech caused Li Nanheng to more or less calm down. However, his eyes were still coldly staring at Qiao Fei, who was standing by the car door fearlessly and laughing. Boss Li, even if we leave the base, I will still call you boss. Qiao Fei used the tip of his tongue to touch his cheeks that had a slight taste of blood. He said coldly, when it comes to chasing a girl, fair competition has always been important. You are very good, but I'm not bad either. If she likes you, then I've lost. But there's nothing wrong with me expressing my feelings in my own way. You don't need to look as though you want to kill me. America is also a society governed by law. Your Li family is not the only powerful one. If you want to kill someone outside, it won't be that easy. Feng Ling frowned and turned back to shout at him, Qiao Fei, stop talking. Hurry up and leave. Qiao Fei retracted his gaze and looked at Feng Ling again. I want a fair competition. What competition? I'm not some fairy-like beautiful girl. After pretending to be a man for so many years, I don't even know how to love someone. There's no need for anyone to do anything for me. Even if I die outside, no one will remember me. I'm not worth it. You're worth it. After Qiao Fei finished speaking, he did not say anything more. He raised his hand to wipe the corner of his mouth and chuckled lightly. It wasn't clear whether he was laughing at others or himself. He then opened the car door, took off his coat and threw it into the car. He stood by the car door for a while, as though restraining the urge to walk over and fight back before sitting in the car. The Bentley honked a few times on the parking lot and then drove away resolutely. After confirming that Xiao Fei had left, even if Li Nanheng wanted to beat up someone, there was no one to beat up. Feng Ling let out a long sigh of relief and then abruptly let go of the man she had been hugging tightly. She was about to take a step back when her waist suddenly tightened. The man pressed her back into his arms. When she raised her head in confusion and was about to speak, he abruptly bent down and kissed her hard. Chapter 988. The man's sudden kiss was so strong that she couldn't bear it. Her body staggered back uncontrollably, but the man's arm held her tightly in his arms, locking her in his arms. The overwhelming kiss made her instantly lose the strength to resist. Even her instinctive struggle and retreat turned into a feeling of numbness all over her body. Her nerves trembled with the sudden intense and somewhat excessive kiss. Feng Ling could clearly feel that the man was not in a good mood. She could also feel his anger. She closed her eyes and allowed him to kiss her passionately. Even when the man's hand tightened around her waist as though he was about to break her waist, she did not make any sound or struggle. It wasn't until she was really out of breath that he finally let go of her. However, he only gave her a second to breathe before he kissed her again. He ignored the pedestrians and cars passing by in the apartment, ignored the embarrassed gazes and fingers of the passers-by, and kissed as if there was only him and her in this world. Feng Ling's entire body turned soft as she leaned against his chest. She felt as though all the air in her lungs was about to be sucked dry, and she could not muster up any strength. The man suddenly let go of her. Just when she thought that it was finally over and they could finally talk properly, the man expressionlessly grabbed her hand and turned to walk into the apartment. "Boss." Feng Ling's heart suddenly pounded. She didn't understand what he was going to do, but she vaguely understood what he wanted to do. She hesitated for a moment but was still forcibly dragged into the door of the apartment building by the man. The man brought her all the way into the elevator and then all the way into the apartment. When the door opened, Feng Ling stumbled and was dragged in by the man. As the door closed with a ping sound, she felt her body being thrown uncontrollably onto the sofa closest to the door, in the middle of the living room. Feng Ling's foot tripped over a railing by the coffee table. Wen Yi, who could barely stand, suddenly fell back. The moment she fell heavily on the sofa, the man pressed down on her. When she subconsciously shrank her neck and tried to turn her face away, he pressed her against the sofa, pulled her face with one hand and kissed her fiercely again. The kiss in the apartment was completely different from the kiss outside. One with anger and emotion, the other with obvious lust. Feng Ling's hands hammered Li Nanheng's body twice and were firmly pressed by his sides. The man's kiss was domineering and turbulent. Without any hesitation, he turned to attack her sensitive parts. She shrunk her neck and wanted to hide, but she couldn't help but tremble because of the kiss and the surging feeling. Boss, wake up. I know you're angry." She tried to make him regain his senses. However, the man directly held her chin and sealed her mouth again. He kissed her deeply for a long time, and just as Feng Ling was about to lose control of his kiss, he suddenly reached out and lifted her up from the sofa. Her body and feet were suspended in the air, making people instinctively want to hug the person in front of them. Feng Ling was no exception. She hugged the man's neck and lowered her head to see the things in the man's eyes that she couldn't resist. The man carried her into the bedroom, kicked the door shut and pressed her into the bed. Following that, whether it was taking off her clothes or his own, his movements were so smooth that Feng Ling had no room to push him away. The man kissed her passionately. All of a sudden, the sound of the man unbuckling his belt could be heard in the air. Feng Ling closed her eyes. She had a premonition that the heart-wrenching pain she had experienced that night was coming again. Right now, Li Nanheng was not in a coma. He was very awake and his body was not as weak as it was when he had a high fever. She had a premonition that she might die. However, just as the man was ready to move, he forcefully pressed her hand down and firmly pressed her arm to the side because he kept kissing her. All of a sudden, the sequela left by the snake bite on Feng Ling's arm was the occasional sudden pain and numbness. She was used to this feeling, but being pressed against the bed and unable to move, the pain caused her face to pale. Her body, which had been slightly heated by the man, also turned cold and trembled. Because of her sudden tremble, Li Nanheng immediately stopped moving. Her trembling from being kissed was different from this tremble. It was impossible for Li Nanheng not to feel it. He immediately thought of something and lowered his head to see her pale face under the dim light of the bedroom. He then turned to look at her stiff arm that was pressed under his palm and withdrew his hand. As soon as her arm was free, Feng Ling quickly moved her hand back and then moved it very slowly, trying to make the pain and numbness in her arm disappear. Looking at her painful and careful movements and her forbearing expression, Li Nanheng felt as though someone had splashed a basin of cold water on his head and sobered him up. He abruptly got up and at the same time, pulled the quilt over to cover the girl who was almost unclothed by him and turned to walk out. Feng Ling waited on the bed for the pain in her arm to pass before she sat up with the quilt in her hands. The apartment was very quiet, so quiet that she could hear the sound of water coming from the bathroom after Li Nanheng returned to the bedroom opposite. Needless to say, he went to take a cold shower. She lowered her head to look at her arm, rubbed it with her other hand, and then looked in the direction of the bedroom opposite. After thinking for a while, she got out of bed, tidied up her clothes and then sat on the bed, not knowing what she should do. 15 minutes later, the sound of water stopped. Not long after, Li Nanheng came out in a dark blue bathrobe, sat on the sofa, lit a cigarette and smoked for a while. Then from Feng Ling's angle, she saw that the man seemed to be leaning against the sofa and did not move for a long time. Boss Li's mood seemed to be really not right. If it was only because he saw her and Xiao Fei hugging each other earlier, it would be fine if he was jealous. He would not be like this. She got up and walked out. She walked to the sofa and saw that the man had already pressed out the cigarette in the ashtray on the coffee table. He seemed to be resting on the sofa with his eyes closed. Even when he heard her approaching, he did not open his eyes. However, Feng Ling could tell from his breathing and closed eyes that he was not asleep. Chapter 989. She stood by the sofa for a while. Seeing that he was leaning against it, she thought for a moment and went back to the bedroom to take out a thin blanket and gently covered the man's body. Li Nanheng closed his eyes and did not respond. She sat on the carpet in front of the sofa, looked up at the man who seemed to have something on his mind and asked, "Boss, are you in a bad mood?" The man did not respond. "Is there something on your mind?" He still did not speak. Feng Ling wondered if he was having a headache because of the alcohol. She was about to get up to see if she should go behind the sofa to massage his head when the man's voice suddenly rang hoarsely, "Feng Ling, do you like me?" The girl sitting on the ground still had a hickey on her neck from his kiss. Although her clothes were tidied up, it was still a bit messy. She sat on the carpet, hugging her knees. She did not change her position. She just looked at him. The man lowered his head from the sofa and looked at the girl sitting on the carpet. "Answer me." Seeing the coldness and seriousness in his eyes, Feng Ling inexplicably felt that her answer seemed to be very important to him. She couldn't answer carelessly. So he thought for a while and said, "Boss, I don't know much about relationships, but according to the feelings I have for you and other men, I don't feel too repulsed to be with you." Li Nanheng still looked at her expressionlessly. "Don't give me so many reasons. I just want to ask you, do you like it or not?" Feng Ling looked into his eyes and slowly nodded. "I like it." The man's slightly cold gaze was instantly moved. Sitting on the sofa, he threw away the thin blanket on his body, lowered his head, lifted her chin and kissed her lips. This kiss was very gentle, but it also touched the tip of her tongue. When Feng Ling tried to express her feelings and was about to respond, the man suddenly paused because of her response. His eyes, which had just calmed down after a cold shower, darkened again. He released her lips and pressed his forehead against hers, saying hoarsely, "You're not even 18 years old. You're still a child. If you like me, can you wait for me? When you're 20, I'll marry you and make you Mrs. Li N." Feng Ling did not have any thoughts about marriage. In fact, she had never even thought about it. The words Mrs. Li were also unfamiliar to her. But for some reason she yearned for it. So looking at the man's face, she slowly nodded. "And wait for me for 3 years." The man's voice was so hoarse that it was almost inaudible. She nodded obediently. "Do you want to go back to the base? Continue to pretend to be a man and live in the base. Live the life you want. At least for these 3 years, if you want to go back to the base, I can help you." The man pressed his lips against hers. "Want to go back?" Feng Ling answered without hesitation, "Yes." Suddenly, the man's hand gently caressed her head. He stepped back and looked at her tenderly. "In the next 3 years, you can go back to the base and continue to find your sense of belonging. We'll go back to the sniper team and train like before. As for your gender, only I know. No one else will know, okay?" Feng Ling didn't quite understand why he suddenly allowed her to return to the base and why he suddenly said that she could continue living the life she wanted in the base for the next 3 years. He clearly wanted to hide her outside the base and didn't want her to go back to the base with those men, right? But of course it was good to return to the base and it was even better to return to her original state. She nodded. All right. Seeing her obedient look, Li Nanheng stared at her face. Aren't you going to ask me why? I won't. Boss, everything you've arranged for me is definitely for my own good. Besides, boss, you don't like to explain too much to others. You have your reasons for your decisions. I'm a member of 11 Base and it's my duty to obey all your orders. I'm also the person you like so you won't hurt me. I trust you, Feng Ling answered very sincerely. Li Nanheng looked at her for a long while and suddenly smiled. I have one more request. What? After returning to the base, move in from the room next door and live with me. You know, the bed in my room is quite big. Feng Ling. After confirming that Feng Ling's arm was recovering very well, Feng Ling was finally allowed to pack her luggage and return to the base as long as she let the arm that had been bitten by the snake rest as much as possible during daily training and went to the infirmary to have Dr. Wen give her a massage. Feng Ling was finally allowed to pack her bags and return to the base. It seemed that since she was injured in the military last time, she hadn't officially returned to the base for at least 3 months and hadn't received training for such a long time. Because of Qiao Fei's departure, the sniper team changed to a new drill master. Li Nanheng was still the main drill master, and the new deputy drill master was surnamed Shen. It was said that he was transferred from the elite team. He was not tall and didn't look as good as Qiao Fei. She didn't need to guess to know why Li Nanheng transferred such a person to be the deputy drill master. He really didn't give her any chance to be distracted. During the training break, Kay sat next to Feng Ling and asked her, "Your hair has almost grown past your ears. You didn't have a chance to shave it when you were outside. Although your hair wasn't as flat as ours, it wasn't so long. What's wrong? Your arm still hurts. Is it inconvenient? Do you want to come to my place tonight? I'll shave it for you." Feng Ling was about to speak when Li Nanheng, who passed by, turned back and said coldly, "Shave what? You can't shave it." Feng Ling. Kay turned to look at him with a dumbfounded expression. "Boss, I mean, Feng Ling's hair is too long." Long hair? It's not very popular this year. Those who look like the Beatles outside have long hair, but they are no different from other men, right? Li Nanheng argued with a deadpan expression. Kay, is it popular for men to keep their hair a little longer this year? Is it too late for me to grow it a little longer now? Feng Ling. Li Nanheng glanced at him indifferently and said coldly, "If you aren't afraid of scaring the girls outside to death, you can keep it." What? Boss, you think Feng Ling's hair is better, but I want to scare people to death if I grow it a little longer. I also have good facial features, okay? Kay was not convinced. Li Nanheng first glanced at Feng Ling's face appreciatively and meaningfully, then glanced at Kay with disdain and turned away. Kay, boss, you're too biased. Be careful, or I'll spread the news that I found you in Feng Ling's room last time. Feng Ling. Chapter 990. After returning to the base, Li Nanheng didn't just occasionally go to Feng Ling's room. He clearly went there often, okay? After the evening training, Feng Ling went back to balance her limbs as usual and showered as usual. After showering, she walked out of the bathroom while drying her hair and habitually glanced at the door. She was wondering what was wrong with Li Nanheng tonight. Did the sun rise from the west? A few days ago, he wouldn't go back to sleep peacefully unless he took a few bites of her. Why didn't he come tonight? Just as Feng Ling walked to the bed while drying her hair, she suddenly turned to look out of the window, only to see that the window was pulled open by the man from the outside and he walked in. Feng Ling. She almost forgot that her door was no different from a window. Because the balcony was connected to his balcony, her window was even less hidden. He clearly could come as he pleased. Why didn't you go through the front door today? Feng Ling was startled at first and then looked at him strangely after calming down. The man smelled the fragrance of the shower gel in her room and walked over to sit on the chair by her bed, watching her as she had just showered. Because she had already exposed her gender in front of him, and he was the only one who dared to casually come to her room at night, she no longer wrapped her chest cloth after showering. Right now, she was wearing a very loose white t-shirt. Her hair was half wet and hung on her forehead. She casually pulled it down with her hand and combed it down with her fingers. "I know you just showered at this time, so I came to see you." The man had the same routine attitude as a few days ago. He spoke in a dignified manner, but every time after seeing her, he would carry her over and nibble on her. Feng Ling was almost used to it. She fiddled with her hair again and said, "Actually, my hair has indeed grown a lot. It's fine if I don't return to the base, but now that I'm back, I have to continue being a man. The length of my hair doesn't quite meet the base's standards." "Your hair is the length specially granted by the base's boss. No one dares to say anything." Feng Ling. "Boss, you're abusing your authority. I've worked hard for 11 base for so many years and only hit a wife in the base. So what if I don't let my wife shave her hair? What's wrong with that?" He lowered his head and kissed her lips, which still had the refreshing taste of toothpaste. "I didn't say how long you have to keep your hair, nor did I force you to find your femininity, but shaving your head flat is really too exaggerated. You didn't have such short hair in the base before." Feng Ling didn't know what to say. "You don't have to keep your hair long and I don't want you to find your femininity, but shaving your head flat is really too exaggerated. Did you notice when my hair grew?" Feng Ling was surprised. The man snorted and bit her lips as if punishing her. He pressed her into the bed and nibbled on her mouth, chin, and neck for a long time before finally letting her go. He held her in his arms and pressed her against his chest intimately. He said hoarsely, "I've been paying attention to you since you came in when you were 13. Do you believe me?" Let her. At that time he was suspicious of her. This man had never dispelled his suspicions of her. Other people had been living with her for so many years, but he had left the base for 2 or 3 years, but he still saw through it. Although he didn't say it clearly and she didn't ask much, he clearly wasn't surprised when she confessed to him in the Snake Valley. "Why did you ask so much? You only need to know that I only have eyes for you, right?" The man lowered his head and kissed the top of her head again. Feng Ling actually wanted to complain, but hearing his straightforward confession, her face heated up. She wanted to get up from his arms, but the man refused to let go. "Don't move. I'll hold you for a while longer." "Boss, you should go back to your room to sleep. Otherwise you'll have to take a cold shower again tonight." The man immediately snorted. "Do you know how uncomfortable it is for me to endure it every day? So why don't you grow up quickly? I'll give you 3 years. It should be enough for you to grow up." Feng Ling secretly rolled her eyes. He had already eaten her up before she had even grown up. But he didn't remember it. She didn't have anyone to reason with. Feng Ling almost fell asleep in Li Nanheng's arms. The room was so quiet that she really felt sleepy. Suddenly there was a knock on the door. Feng Ling opened her eyes abruptly and sat up quickly. Li Nanheng was also about to fall asleep. He was woken up by the sound and the girl in his arms suddenly struggled out of his arms. He frowned and looked at the door with some irritation. "It's so late. Who knocks on the door?" Li Nanheng asked. Feng Ling didn't know. She had been in the base for so long. Those who were close to her usually knew that her room was not very close at night. Especially after she moved next door to Boss Li, those people were very sensible and never came to disturb her. Who could knock on the door at this time unless it was... She turned back and gave Li Nanheng a look, meaning for him to quickly go back to his room through the window. The man lay on the bed and didn't move. He had no intention of hiding in his room. He just raised his cold brows and watched her walk to the door. The door was opened. Immediately, 2 young men around 15 or 16 years old grinned at her. "Master Feng Ling. We just heard that you are here. Did we disturb your rest? Today we have a few things to take note of in the base. When we called you we found that your phone was turned off, so we came to look for you." Feng Ling looked at the 2 boys outside the door and the corner of her mouth twitched. In the past few years the base hadn't recruited many new people. A few days ago they actually started to recruit new people again. Recently there were many new members in the base. Most of them were boys in their teens just like them. On the second day after she came back, the base hall assigned more than 10 new members to the sniper team. 2 of them were assigned to her so she could occasionally train these 2 new people. And these 2 boys were very sweet and kept calling her Master Feng Ling. She coughed. "It's so late. Are you sure you want to ask me at this time?" Did we disturb your rest? We just learned that you are living here and saw that the light in your room is still on, so we came over." The 2 boys were a little embarrassed. "Sorry, we just arrived at the base and were assigned to such a powerful sniper team. We were a little excited and wanted to talk to you, Master." Chapter 991. Feng Ling could understand this kind of excitement. She was also very excited when she passed the assessment and joined the sniper team. But she was not good at showing that kind of emotion. Looking at the 2 teenagers, Feng Ling smiled kindly. "If you're excited, you can go to the training ground and run a few laps. It's not convenient for me now. Let's talk tomorrow. The two little boys didn't understand what she meant. Seeing that they couldn't ask, they suddenly said, "Then Master Feng Ling, can we go into your room and sit for a while? I heard that only the most powerful people in the sniper team are qualified to live in this building, and I heard that every room in this building has a large balcony facing the direction of the training ground. It's very good." Feng Ling paused and didn't speak, but the two boys in front of the door were stunned a few seconds later. They raised their heads, watched the man who slowly walked out of the room, and suddenly felt a sense of oppression. Feng Ling sensed their gaze and subconsciously turned her head. Li Nanheng had walked behind her. He was still wearing a black uniform and black trousers, with a thin and cold expression. He had one hand in his trouser pocket and his eyes, and a little cold. The two teenagers outside the door were not short. They were still in the puberty stage and were already more than 175 centimeters tall, but facing Li Nanheng they were still too short. The gap between them was also very obvious. The two boys looked at Boss Li, who actually appeared in Feng Ling's room. This was the Boss Li they had only admired from afar after entering the base, but now he was standing in front of them, oh no, standing behind their master Feng Ling. At the same time, Boss Li's lips were a bit cold. "Don't you know what time it is now? Did you come to 11 base for training or for a vacation?" Feng Ling. Only then did she realize why Li Nanheng was always so unapproachable in front of the newcomers. He really had a temper. If you wanted to do anything in front of him, you would first be frozen to death by his eyes. How on earth did she survive under his suspicious and scrutinizing gaze when she first entered the base? Boss Li. The two boys were extremely excited under the man's cold gaze. Seeing that the two of them were still so excited that they refused to leave, Li Nanheng's cold face gradually became more expressionless. He glanced at them, turned around and walked inside, saying lightly, "It's late. Those who should go back should go back. The curfew rules in the base are very strict. If you want to break the rules as soon as you come in, I won't let you stay even if you pass the assessment." Feng Ling turned back to look at his back and then at the two stunned boys outside the door. She gave them a look, and when they returned to their senses, they hurriedly turned to leave. She then closed the door. The room returned to silence. Feng Ling turned back and glared at the man in the room angrily. "Why didn't you hide when you saw someone coming? You actually dared to challenge them in front of them, scaring them so much that they would probably be traumatized by you in the future. Are you afraid that they won't find out what's going on between us?" Li Nanheng lowered his head and glanced at her. "Is there anything between us that can't be discovered? Adultery. Every night you come over and kiss me." Feng Ling glared at him. Looking at her coquettish expression, Li Nanheng raised his eyebrows. He said lightly, "Why do I have to hide? Is that something a man should do?" Feng Ling. They had clearly agreed that after returning to the base she would continue to disguise as a man and he would help her keep her secret. However, even though this man did not reveal her secret, the possessiveness that he displayed all the time made it obvious that there was something wrong. She glared at him. "You just want everyone to find out that I'm a woman, right? My attitude towards you in the past is no different from the way I treat you now. It's because you have me in your heart and are afraid that others will find out that you're so sensitive. Do you think everyone doesn't know that there's something fishy between us? At such a late hour, apart from these few newbies who would dare to knock on your door? Who would have such a head on their neck for nothing? After so long, who wouldn't be able to tell?" Feng Ling. "Are you saying that they think you're interested in men?" He lowered his eyes to look at her. She did not appear to be much smarter than before after returning to the base. Xiao Su and Han Jin clearly knew about it when they were in Cambodia. As for the others, they didn't have the guts to say anything. It's up to them what they want to think. It's not something I need to worry about. Feng Ling stared at him for a long while and her heart inexplicably relaxed a little. No wonder Han Jin and Xiao Su didn't seem to have changed when they talked to her recently, but they no longer acted like brothers. It turned out that they knew about it. When she was in Cambodia, she was in a coma and underwent surgery for so many days. Han Jin and Xiao Su were also there at that time. It was possible that they knew about it. Both of them were tight-lipped people, so there was indeed nothing to worry about. However, she still said, "I've hidden it in the base for so long. If my gender is exposed because of you, I won't let you off." The man chuckled. His laughter seemed to come from his chest. He suddenly reached out and pulled her into his arms. He lowered his head and bit her lips. "How do you want to let me off?" She hurriedly put her hand on the bedpost and looked at the man who pressed her here. Looking at the man's handsome face, her heart faintly trembled. This feeling of her heart became more and more obvious day by day. Especially after returning to the base, she returned to her original living environment. She found that her feelings for Li Nanheng seemed to be really very special. Different from others. If my thing is exposed, I'll pester you for the rest of my life. Feng Ling didn't know where she learned these words from, but these words suddenly came out of his lips. The man immediately looked at her, and then his brows were shrouded in a layer of smile. What are you smiling at? She wondered if the sour lines she had just learned were a little too boring. She was about to explain when she heard the man say while holding her tightly, "Then I'll pester you for the rest of my life." Looking into his deep eyes, she instantly felt an inexplicable palpitation, and even her mind went blank for several seconds. Her heart moved, and she suddenly took the initiative to tiptoe and kiss the man's lips. It was just a kiss, and she was about to push him away. However, when they were less than 2 fingers apart, the man suddenly pressed her back into his arms. Chapter 992. Although the sky outside was already dark, but the light in the room was very bright. The height difference was too big, and Feng Ling was leaning against the bedpost. Feng Ling felt a little breathless every time the man held her chin and kissed her. And then every time the man took advantage of her being kissed until she was weak, his hand would reach into her clothes, to take advantage of her. "Li Nanheng, you can't come to my room like this every day." Feng Ling pushed him, panting, and turned her head to say, "We agreed to let me continue to be a man. That's in front of them, not in front of me." The man's voice came close to her lips. "In front of me, be your little woman again." Feng Ling wanted to say that she probably wouldn't be able to be a little woman in this lifetime, but the next second she was suddenly lifted up. She let out a low cry, and the man directly sat on the bed, letting her sit on his lap. She placed her hands on his shoulders, and her eyes were still somewhat frightened. Just now, she almost thought that he was going to press her on the bed and do it. She couldn't help but ask, "Don't you plan to go back to your room tonight?" "I don't want to go back every day." The man kissed her lightly on the lips. "When was I not driven back by you?" Feng Ling, sitting on his lap, she really felt that it was a little dangerous. "I want to go down, you." Before she could finish speaking, the man held the back of her head with one hand, forced her to lower her head, and pressed his lips against hers again. A week later. Everyone in 11 Base found a problem. Recently, the elders of the Li family seemed to be frequently entering and leaving the base. Although they did not alight from the car, they seemed to be looking for Boss Li, but Boss Li seemed to be refusing to see them. Another day passed. Last night, Feng Ling trained those brats on the training ground. She trained until very late and slept at almost 1 o'clock in the night. Li Nanheng did not wait for her and entered her room in the middle of the night. He directly held the little woman who was sleeping soundly on the bed into his arms and slept with her in his arms for the entire night. The next morning, when Feng Ling opened her eyes and saw Li Nanheng's face, although she was a little dazed, she was not surprised. She pushed him away and got up to wash up in the bathroom for morning training. After showering, she walked out of the bathroom and saw the handsome man sitting by her bed. His hair was messy, and his eyes were not as cold and indifferent as usual. There was only a hint of indifference, and there was a hint of laziness and sexiness when he just woke up in the morning. "Who said that last time? After returning to the base, at most you will come to see me at night at most. You will never spend the night in my room. You will never spend the night in my room." Li Nanheng glanced at her, unhurriedly picked up the black coat on the bedside and put it on. After putting on the coat, he said lightly, "I'm going to leave the base for a few days. I'll be back in about a week." The man. Li Feng Feng. Feng Feng Yu. Ling, Li Feng. Li Feng and Feng. The man, Feng. Li Feng. "I was afraid that I would miss you, so I came to hug you to sleep. Is there a problem?" It was just a week away from the base. She and Nanheng hadn't spent every day together, had they? It seemed that Boss Li would often go out for a few days when he was busy. He was the person in charge of the base. He had to take care of both inside and outside. 1 week, 7 days. Was there any difference? Feng Ling stood by the bathroom door and pursed her lips. "It seems that the things you are going to do this week will be very hard for you." The man looked at her and smiled lightly. "You have already begun to miss me?" Then he got up, walked over and pressed her against the bathroom door. He lowered his head and kissed the corner of her mouth. "This time, you may not be able to use your phone for the time being. Stay in the base. If you need anything, just tell Hanjin and Xiaosu. They will help you." Feng Ling. "Boss, you are going out for 7 days, not 7 years. I have been fine in the base for so many years. What are you worried about?" I only worry about you because I love you. Even if you are bitten by a mosquito, my heart will ache. Don't you understand? The man bit her lips. Feng Ling did not speak but looked up at him. Lover? At this moment, the man's cell phone rang. He kissed her lips again, glanced at her, picked up his cell phone and turned to go out to answer the call. She didn't know what they were talking about on the phone, but from the man's tone, it seemed that he was impatient. He responded coldly and walked out. When he opened her door and walked out, she felt that the man's footsteps seemed to pause for a moment, but he did not turn back and closed the door for her. The room was silent. For the next 2 days, Li Nanheng was not around. After taking a shower at night, Feng Ling looked at the quiet room without the man. She was really not used to it, and in the past 2 days her eyelids often twitched. Could it be that boss was sent out on a dangerous mission? Was his cell phone turned off? At night, Feng Ling turned over and really couldn't sleep. She picked up her cell phone and called Li Nanheng, but the other party's cell phone was indeed turned off. It was the 3rd day after Li Nanheng left the base. In the morning she trained normally. At noon, when it was time to eat, Feng Ling took her 2 little disciples to do intensive training. She was so busy that she did not have time to eat, so she did not hear the various news and things that were spread in the base cafeteria at noon. In the evening, when she finally found time to go to the cafeteria to eat, she heard several members of the other teams at the next table discussing while eating. Boss Li is too fast. I haven't heard that he has a girlfriend before. How did he suddenly get married? Who the F***ck knows. But I heard that the Li family and the Feng family have always been friends. Maybe Boss Li and that Miss Feng have been engaged since childhood. Because of the engagement, he has never had any other girlfriends. Now that the time has come, he should hurry back and marry that beautiful young lady. That's right. Li Nanheng nodded. I seem to have seen that young lady of the Feng family on the news before. The young lady of the Feng family that boss married should be her, right? She is quite beautiful and looks like a standard young lady from a respectable family, but she seems to be a little arrogant. But as a woman, it's good to be a little arrogant. It's better to be a little spicy. Our boss probably likes this kind of woman, huh? Isn't this the only daughter of the Feng family? Then it must be Miss Feng. Boss, you're really lucky with women. This is too sudden. There was no news a few days ago. Today, the news of your marriage was suddenly announced by the media. It really caught me off guard. Chapter 993. So boss suddenly left the base these days because he asked for a marriage leave? That's right. We're getting married in the day and we're going to consummate our marriage in the evening. Oh, Boss Li's identity, family background, and everything he has done for so many years are all enviable. I didn't expect that his marriage has already been properly arranged. Marrying such a rich girl, the Feng family's status in Los Angeles is not bad. I'm really envious. Feng Ling lowered her head and gently fiddled with the food on the plate. Suddenly, she lost her appetite. There were all kinds of rumors in the base. But it seemed that no one dared to casually talk about Li Nanheng. Especially the topic of Li Nanheng's marriage. But even if she didn't believe it, she couldn't eat the food in front of her. She thought of what Li Nanheng had said recently and what he had told her before he left this time. As soon as she put a mouthful of rice into her mouth, it tasted like wax. She raised her head to look outside the base cafeteria, then at the people sitting at the table next to her. She got up and went to another table to get a glass of milk to drink. However, when she went to get the milk, she heard people talking about Li Nanheng's marriage again. They also said that they saw the news of the marriage between the famous Li family and the Feng family in Los Angeles today. Feng Ling picked up her cell phone and searched for the keyword Li family in Los Angeles. The search page on her cell phone was full of many news articles. It was not fake. In the photos in the news, there was a scene of Li Nanheng getting out of the limited edition extended wedding car. The photo only showed his silhouette. She couldn't see the man's eyes or expression. She could only see that he was surrounded by the media, wearing a black suit without a single wrinkle. Even the silhouette was beautiful. He was born to be superior and no one could match him. When he put on the black uniform, he was an invincible warrior. When he put on the suit, he was superior. As those people said, he was far inferior. The man seemed to be holding a bouquet of white roses in his hand. Feng Ling didn't know what the white roses represented, but in the background of the photo, there was a sea of white roses in front of the Feng family's house. He was going to marry Feng Mingzhu today. He clearly said that Feng Mingzhu was not his fiancée. He clearly said that he didn't have any feelings for Feng Mingzhu. But he still married the daughter of the Feng family. And unbeknownst to her, when she had finally let go of her armor and was ready to embrace the love that had moved her, he had gone to marry someone else. Feng Ling stood in the cafeteria holding her phone and did not move for a long time. When she raised her eyes again, her gaze was calm and dead silent. She abruptly walked out. It was already past dinner time, and the training camp of Team 1 was very quiet. There were only a few members sitting in the corner, chatting and smoking. When they saw Feng Ling, they raised their hands to greet her. But she walked straight into Han Jin's residence with no expression on her face. As soon as she entered, she came to the door of Han Jin's room. She wanted to go in and ask them. They must know what was going on. She was about to knock on the door when she suddenly heard the conversation inside. Xiao Su had just come over and was in the room. From the beginning, when he learned that Boss Li was married to the Feng family, Xiao Su was also very shocked. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that something was wrong. He felt that this was not something Boss Li could do. In the past, he only heard that the Li family seemed to have an engagement with the Feng family, and everyone thought that Feng Mingzhu would marry Li Nanheng. But later it seemed that the situation was not like this, and Boss Li had no intention of marrying Feng Mingzhu. So what on earth was going on? Boss really got married today? Xiao Su sat in Han Jin's room, took out a cigarette and hesitated to smoke it. Han Jin glanced at him. How could this kind of thing be fake? What about Feng Ling? Boss and Feng Ling are clearly in love recently. Now many people in the base don't know the situation, but we too know very well that Feng Ling is also a woman. How can she stand it? Does Boss plan to have a wife outside and a woman in the base? Does he not lack women to accompany him? Don't talk nonsense. Is Boss that kind of person? I know Boss is not this kind of person, but this is not right. Did he tell Feng Ling anything? Did he suddenly get married? Feng Ling is still waiting for him to come back in the base? Even if Boss comes back, he will be a married man. What does he think of Feng Ling? Seeing Xiao Su's expression, Han Jin was puzzled. Boss has his own ideas. We all know how he treats Feng Ling, but the matter between the Li family and the Feng family is not so simple. He also has his responsibility. In front of the person he likes and the responsibility, Boss chose the responsibility, which is what a man should bear. What about Feng Ling? Feng Ling is still young. In fact, she just had a fruitless relationship. Even if she knows about this, she will be sad for a few days. Sad for a few days? Do you expect Feng Ling to fall in love with someone else? Didn't you find that she is gradually opening up to Boss? She is not as boring as before. She has Boss Li in her heart, but she doesn't express it. Now if she knows, I guess she won't say anything. Then don't say it. It's good for everyone to live in peace. Damn it, when you saw the two of them together, you were the first one who was excited. Now Boss got married and left Feng Ling in the base and you say this kind of thing? What can I say? I can drag Boss Li over and force him to marry Feng Ling. You know the status of the Li family. Even if Boss Li is willing to come back and marry Feng Ling now, those elders are already very merciful. They are already very merciful if they don't cut Feng Ling into pieces, okay? So what's going on now? It means that when Boss Li was feeling empty in the base, he found out that Feng Ling was a woman, and then he suddenly had a girl to entertain him. And a girl like Feng Ling is just a pastime for him. He just wants her and throws her away as he pleases. Don't be so extreme. Boss didn't say this kind of thing. In my eyes, this is what Boss Li means now. Seeing that Xiao Su was not calm at this moment, Han Jin didn't have the patience to care about these things. After all, this was Boss Li's own decision. Until now, no one knew what happened. Han Jin sneered. Damn it, she is just a woman. We are all adults. They just fell in love. So what? Compared with Miss Feng of the Feng family, Feng Ling is an orphan with an unknown identity. As long as you are not stupid, you will know who to choose. Chapter 994. Xiao Su suddenly smashed the ashtray on the table to the ground. What the hell are you talking about? Han Jin said with a straight face, it's not Boss Li who dumped you. Why are you so king excited? I've liked so many women since I was a child, and I've slept with many women before entering the base. If they all waited for me to marry them, I would have already had a group of wives and concubines. Why do I still need to be a drill master in the base? In the end, Han Jin kicked the chair impatiently. Isn't she just a little girl who disguised as a man and hid in the base for a long time? She's not feminine at all and so violent. It's okay for her to be a comrade, but it's normal for him to be surprised when he accidentally found out that she is a woman. Why do you think she is worthy of Boss Lee giving up the engagement with the Feng family? Do you dare to say that Boss Lee's love for Feng Ling is just a coincidence? Otherwise, which man will be faithful to a woman until death? Are you stupid? He doesn't like Feng Ling? Liking her doesn't mean he has to take responsibility. A silly girl like Feng Ling is not suitable for him. Then why the F***ck did you help me set them up? I didn't know Feng Ling was a woman when we were matchmakers. I found out later, but now he's married to the Feng family. What else can I say? Han Jin knew that he was annoyed and said something against his will, but when he thought that Li Nanheng was married to the Feng family, he didn't want to talk about this matter anymore, so he said, Feng Ling and Boss shouldn't be in the same world. If it weren't for the base, the two of them would have nothing to do with each other. I guess Feng Ling knows very well that it's good for them to go their separate ways in the future. Boss, you're not from the same world. If it weren't for the base, the two of them would have nothing to do with each other. I guess Feng Ling knows it very well. Han Jin said again, Feng Ling is an orphan. She doesn't even know who her parents are. Will you marry her? If they don't belong to the same world, they shouldn't force their way in. She should fall in love while she is young. When she grows up, she will know not to trust men easily. I think Boss Lee taught her a good lesson. At least she won't be easily cheated in the future. After all, she is too naive. Han Jin didn't know what to say. But looking at Xiao Su's furious expression, he just wanted to get this matter over with as soon as possible. After all, they didn't know what Boss Lee was thinking, but since it was over, they could only think from another perspective. One of them was angry while the other was impatient. The thin wooden door was unable to suppress the intense voices. No one noticed that there was a person standing outside the door. He stood there, his eardrums swollen from the argument between the two men in the room. Strangely, the place that was shattered seemed to be somewhere else. Feng Ling just thought that Li Nanheng wouldn't do such a thing. She felt that there must be a reason for this matter. Usually, Han Jin and Xiao Su had been following Li Nanheng, and they were the first to know everything. They would definitely know what had happened. However, the fierce quarrel in the room made her heart, which had been pounding since she heard the news in the cafeteria, completely calm down. Not only did it quiet down, it was stuck in its chest. He was motionless as if he was dead. Separated by a door, the people in the room were still arguing fiercely. The people outside the door paused for a moment and left quietly. Feng Ling left. When she stepped out of the training camp of Team 1, Fat Tai happened to come back at this time. He walked too fast and bumped into her arm. When he looked back and saw it was her, he hurriedly asked her, Feng Ling, why are you here? Did you also hear that Boss is getting married? Did you also come to ask for wedding candies? I tell you, Boss is so mean. He didn't even tell the base that he was getting married. Now, not only did he not drink the wedding wine, but he also didn't eat the wedding candies. Although they usually made fun of Feng Ling and Boss Lee, many men were very simple in their bones. What could two men do? They just fooled around. Since Boss was married today, the Feng family's daughter was Mrs. Lee, and this Feng Ling was still the Feng Ling of their base. There was no change. Seeing Feng Ling didn't speak, Fat Tai was about to press her shoulder, but coincidentally, he pressed the place where she was bitten by the snake. Feng Ling instantly retracted her arm as if she had been electrocuted. She remembered that day on the stone platform under the cliff of the Snake Valley. Li Nanheng cut her wound with a cross knife and sucked out the poisonous blood for her regardless of his own safety. That day she was cold and numb all over. Only the wound he sucked out was faintly hot, which made her feel that she was still alive. Looking at the man in front of her who had been trying to save her, she knew that there was someone in this world who cared so much about her life. And now, the small place on her shoulder with the cross knife mark had no warmth at all. Even if it was just pressed like this. She couldn't help trembling in pain. For so many years, Feng Ling had never felt that it was so long to walk from the training camp of Team 1 to the training camp of the sniper team. Even though it was past dinner time, the teenagers who had just entered the base were still receiving training. They ran 4 laps around the base and from time to time, someone called her name. Brother Feng. Brother Feng. Feng Ling. Master Feng Ling. There were also some people assigned to other teams who had only heard of her name and did not recognize her. As they ran, they looked in this direction blankly, only to see a thin figure walking in the dark of the base. She didn't say a word and just returned to the training camp of the sniper team. She wanted to go back to her room to stay alone, but found that it was terribly quiet now. No one could get close to the sniper team, including the newcomers who were running laps. It was too quiet, so quiet that her heart felt a little empty. She simply turned to the empty training ground of the sniper team, picked up the sniper rifle that had only 5 bullets left, and fired a shot in the direction of the target that was as far as 500 meters away on the training ground. Bang! The distance of 500 meters, even the fastest bullet had to fly for a while. 2 seconds later, she hit the bullseye. In her 4th year in the base, when she didn't know whether she was 17 or 18 years old, she achieved the standard target of 500 meters and hit the bullseye. Then what else? She wanted to stay in 11 base and stay here forever. But just like what Han Jin said, some people were just moved and impulsive for a short period of time. Was she going to pester others to take responsibility for her? But if she saw him in the base in the future, how should she face him? Bang 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 bang. Another 4 shots. 500 meters. Every shot hit the bullseye. At this moment, Feng Ling knew that with her results in the sniper team, even if she didn't take the assessment, she had already graduated. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.